We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H, and this week I'm here with
Joe Klusnick, back again.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Joe. We haven't seen you in quite a while, and certainly the first time in 2026. Good to have you back.
Happy New Year. Thanks for calling me up.
Yeah, for sure. Little behind the scenes here. First of all, anyone who's looking at the description and title of this episode is going to be like, what the heck is this numbering scheme? Tom and I are like, we're just way too procrastinating and busy to like do things properly. So we're going to string things out where it's going to be a long time before we reach episode 1000, which technologically speaking, we're not able to call episode one. It's ridiculous stuff that's behind the scenes. But anyway, get used to the weird decimal points for a while, because that's probably going to be going on. And then also behind the scenes, we had hoped Joe and Lee Overstreet and I have been attempting to do a 3-man podcast for I don't know how long. Something always comes up. Like we've had all three of us here several times, and then something always comes up and throws a spanner into the works. And it's happened again. We were gonna have a 3-man podcast with Lee this week, but Lee just wasn't able to make it at the same time that Joe can make it this week, and then here we are. But that's okay. We're gonna do a regular 2-man podcast here on AV Rant, and Joe, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Glad I could help out.
So since we haven't talked to you in a while, we got to catch up a little bit. What's been going on? How was your holidays? I think there's been some kind of big changes behind the scenes for you, but we haven't chatted at all beforehand, so it'll all be news to me as well.
Holidays were wonderful. Thank you for asking. Had most of the family here, and then we all were able to take a cruise together, which was very nice. So went down to Mexico for about a week and saw everybody. And then shortly thereafter, my wife and I just got back last night from another trip. We were down in Colombia for a rewards trip with my company, which was really nice. But yeah, I got in about 2:30 in the morning yesterday, went in the office today a little bleary-eyed. Now I'm here.
Yup. You're pushing through, and I thank you for it. No complaints from Joe, I got to say. He's like, yep, I'm on it. If he can make it scheduling-wise, just don't worry about sleep and recovery, right?
It's hard to find people to talk home theater with, so there's a chance I get.
So, I don't know, like, are you at liberty to say anything? Were there any, like, I thought there was like a career change or something, but I don't want to like get anybody in any trouble, so.
No. Same company I've been with for a while, still doing side projects for other folks, but no major changes on that right now.
Alrighty, okay. So I was either thinking of someone else or misinformed or whatever, but that's okay. Makes that part of it easy. We have oodles and oodles to get to this week. So you'll notice Tom is away. I don't actually know entirely what was going on. He probably said it to me at some point, but stuff goes in and out of my ears just the way as anything I say goes in and out of Tom's ears. That's how it gets after you've been podcasting together for this long. But I did want to say as another just FYI for everybody out there, because not everybody is going to have heard last week's episode. We had another email snafu. We're pretty darn sure it was limited to occurring just between January the 6th and January the 11th, because our emails seem to be coming through fine the day before that and the day after that. But yeah, there was another whole bunch of completely vanished emails that you'll see it in your own sent folder. There's not going to be any indication that it was never delivered or that it bounced back or anything like that. But it just never reached us during that week between January 6th and January 11th. So we know for a fact several people did hear us last week because people resent their emails, and thank you so much for doing so. But I'm sure there are at least a handful out there that haven't done so yet. So all we can do is apologize once again. It was like until we noticed, hey, where are the emails? There wasn't much to check on it, and then it seems like it's properly fixed now. So. Send your emails again, and I might as well go ahead and give out our contact information while we're talking about it. The best way to get in touch with us is emailing us. Yes, emailing us is still the best way to get in contact with us. It does seem to be working now, so question@avrant.com. That is the best way to reach us. Question@avrant.com via email. You can, of course, come to our website. That is avrant.com. No surprise. You can see our show notes there, and we'll have links to products and articles that we reference in the podcast. We'll also have our Flickr album links there so that you can see images that we're referencing. If you want to see those images as we're discussing them, come to youtube.com/AVRant. You can see our YouTube version. You'll see Joe's face, you'll see my face this week, and you'll see any images that we're referencing up on screen at the time we're talking about them. But if you want to do audio only, we do have the Flickr album. Then you can reach us other ways. There's Tom at avrant.com to email him directly. I'm Rob at avrant.com. Lee at avrant.com is not working anymore. So Joe, you're not like out. You're not different from Lee anymore. We like
I think another 8 years, 8 more years, I might get an email address.
That's right.
Hanging in,
and then it'll just mysteriously stop working on you.
And
one
then
day
it'll stop working.
That could be the way. But social medias, I'm barely on social media at all. But if you're going to find me, it's going to be on Blue Sky. I'm at First Reflect on Blue Sky. So Joe, can folks reach you outside of this podcast in some way?
Yeah, you can hit me up over probably on AVS Forum. It's under JSKMDWK.
Alrighty, JSKMDWK. It doesn't really form an acronym that you can say out loud, but it is an initialism of some sort.
It's my wife's initials and my initials, yes.
That'll work. All right. So let's see. Anything else to catch up on before we start into the regular podcast here, Joe?
Sounds good. Let's go.
All right, so why don't we talk about what we watched? Tom isn't here to tell us about his, Lee isn't here, but Joe is here, so you're the guest. Let's start off. What have you been watching? I mean, obviously not everything since last we talked to you. That would take up quite the amount of time.
True. So I tried to limit to what I watched kind of over the holidays and more recently. We, like most of the world, watched Stranger Things Season 5. Really enjoyed that. Was able to, I got Tron Ares for a Christmas present, so I sat down with a couple of my sons and watched that at home. Really enjoyed the audio and video presentation of that movie.
Okay.
Liked a lot of elements of it, the way it referenced back to the first movie, very much a little bit to the second movie. But the story was a little bit flat, but I like seeing big, high-budget sci-fi. I saw it in the theater. I saw it at home in 4K. Okay. So yeah, it was a fun one.
So that sounds like you got it as a physical disc. Is that correct?
Kaleidoscape download.
Oh, Kaleidoscape download. Okay, that makes sense. Is there any chance you've seen the Disney Plus version? Because I'm just trying to figure out why the audio was so disappointing when I watched it, but I did stream it from Disney Plus, and I'm like, maybe that's the problem.
Whenever I'm watching something critically, it's either disc or Kaleidoscape, so no. Okay,
so you were impressed with the audio. Like, what was there prodigious bass in that movie the way you watched it?
Not as much as the second movie.
Okay.
But definitely there were some scenes, and just the sci-fi elements coming into the real world. I really enjoyed that. The very neon imagery of it looked super cool.
Okay. That sounds like it adds up then.
So then switching back to the commercial theater, we did go see Avatar Fire and Ash.
Okay.
And saw it in 3D. And I'm not usually a fan of 3D. Don't go to a lot of them, but I know James Cameron really wanted me to see it that way. He asked me personally. So got the glasses, paid all the money at our local Cinemark theater, and had a really good time watching that. Again, that story felt to me like more of the same. We had just watched Avatar 2 in preparation for it. This third one picked up right after it, and felt played a lot of the same beats. I am probably going to pick that up, when it does come out on Kaleidoscape. Oh, sure. I think that it will be a great surround sound and low frequency test. There's some scenes where things are exploding or flying away, or the whales are talking to each other. I think it will test subwoofers interestingly. Next on my list was I did finish.
Just before we move on from Avatar, the theater you saw it at, was it capable of the high frame rate, or was it regular 24 frames per second?
Couldn't tell you. I did notice that with the glasses on, the image was a little bit dimmer, but after a little while, you forgot about them. And then with a 3-hour movie, I had to take them off to run to the bathroom one time. But other than that, had a good experience.
And it was not IMAX. It was like regular size theater, or
Cinemark XD is what they call it. So it's their premium presentation at their
large
theaters.
format, but not actual IMAX branded and not Dolby Cinema branded. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Being the completist that I am, I also read and watched the Terminal List. So a friend of mine had given me the book as a present, and then read through that, and then watched the series on Amazon. Really enjoyed it. Thought that Chris Pratt did a great job in that role. You could definitely pick out the differences between the book and the series, but enjoyed both of those. Then while we were home between New Year's and our other trip, my wife said she really wanted to go see Song Sung Blue. She's a fan of musicals. She really likes Hugh Jackman in musicals. We actually had seen him on Broadway a couple years back when we were in New York, so that was cool.
Nice.
So we did see Song Sung Blue, which was so poorly marketed as a movie. I didn't know if it was a biopic, but it turns out it's the story of and it's based on a true story of a impersonator who does a lot of Neil Diamond songs and becomes very popular with that. So it was actually had a lot of depth to the story. It was, nice. The family that he becomes a part of and then kind of grows up around the band, and a lot of the, struggles that they go through together. And the music kind of takes kind of a backdrop to that for a little while. But well done, poorly marketed, fun to watch.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I didn't even know that was out. So
a lot of people didn't. It went straight to like the 12th screen in the theater, I think. So
wow, okay.
But yeah, so enjoyed that one. Also watched a movie called Roofman, based on a true story again. This was about a guy, former military, who made some bad decisions and started robbing McDonald's by cutting holes in the roofs.
Okay, yep.
But was extremely polite, never hurt anybody, but robbed like 45 McDonald's this way.
Hey, Scott Lang would correct you. He burgled them if there was no violence involved.
Okay, true enough. But he eventually gets caught and then escapes again and ends up hiding in a Toys R Us and starting a relationship with somebody who works there. Okay. So it was an interesting story. It started out pretty lighthearted, ended in a very kind of an intense way, because things are happening and characters are treating each other different ways. But yeah, was an interesting watch. Again, my wife wanted to see that one, so whenever she's interested to watch a movie, I'm like, yep, we'll watch that right now. Let's turn it on tonight. So that was a streaming one. And then the last one that I mentioned is kind of more in preparation for a movie that's coming out. And I just finished reading the book Hail Mary, and this is upcoming Ryan Gosling film that's coming out by the same author that wrote The Martian, which I had also read the book.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, Andy Weir's his name. Hail Mary was an excellent book. I tore through that book laying by the pool or sitting on a beach in our last vacation, and really enjoyed it. Very, very touching story. Very well written. The science in it is great. It's Earth is being plagued by a problem. He's one of the few people who is prepared to study this kind of thing, ends up having to become an astronaut. And so I don't want to tell you too much, but it looks fantastic. But the book is really good.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I remember getting a bit excited for that one, and I'm sure they're going to be marketing it as from the creators of The Martian like crazy, because so many people are familiar and have a lot of fond thoughts for The Martian. So that's pretty easy marketing on that side.
And I love that movie too. That was a great one.
It was really good. All right. Well, for my part, I watched one movie this past week, which was the latest to release at home from Yorgos Lanthimos. Famously the director of Poor Things and Kinds of Kindness. More recently also did The Lobster and Killing of a Sacred Deer years ago. So his latest one to come to home release is Bugonia. So Bugonia, if you're not familiar, it's a Greek mythological practice. It was the belief that if you ritualistically sacrificed an ox, and then kept it like sealed in basically kind of a tomb, that after an amount of time, there would be honeybees that would spring forth from the carcass. So whenever they were short on honeybees, this is a ritual, like mythologically, this is a ritual they would perform, and honeybees would spontaneously spring forth from the body of this sacrificed ox. So it's literally a portmanteau of the Greek words for oxen born, and that's where that title comes from. Now, the title itself and the myth are not directly referenced in this movie whatsoever, and also this movie, Bugonia, is actually a remake of a South Korean film called Save the Green Planet! So the writer-director of Save the Green Planet gets a writing credit on this movie, and then Yorgos Lanthimos is not listed as a writer. There was a separate writer for this English language version. So once again, we're starring Emma Stone because everything that Yorgos Lanthimos seems to star Emma Stone, but also starring Jesse Plemons. And those two are fantastic in this movie. I mean, you can certainly watch this movie just for the acting of those two, if nothing else. But also, interestingly, a brand new actor, Aidan Delbis, playing a character who is on the autism spectrum, and he himself in real life is on the autism spectrum. So nice that they did that bit of casting and not having somebody play that who doesn't have that in real life. So yeah, all the performances in this movie are top notch, and for the vast majority of this movie, I was really, really enjoying it. Just to give you the very light synopsis and not go into any spoilers, Jesse Plemons and Aidan Delbis, they are, I think they're actually cousins in this movie. If not, they're very good family friends or something like that. But anyway, they have fallen down the conspiracy rabbit hole together. Mostly Jesse Plemons. He's by far the leader of this duo. And they are of the belief that all of the bees on Earth are dying and all of our minds are being not like directly controlled, but basically kind of like making us dumber and dumber. All because there are actual, honest-to-goodness aliens on this planet, and they think Emma Stone is one of them. So this is the conspiracy theory scenario that we're dealing with in this movie. Now, what makes it so interesting, and this is quite different from Save the Green Planet, which had the same basic outline of the story, but Yorgos Lanthimos, what he loves to do most is, take a thematic topic and really examine it, and then also go to strange places with it. So it's obvious that he's having quite a time with this conspiracy theory. I mean, we hear about lots of people who are believing in conspiracy theories these days, and having one of the main characters really into that. But then also having Emma Stone, she's the CEO of a medical company, and she is not going to be any type of pushover. She has had all the training for what to do if you're ever kidnapped or abducted or anything like that, and she puts all of that training into practice. And what I liked for the vast majority of this movie is that Jesse Plemons might be a conspiracy theory nut, but he's not in any way dumb. He is very well spoken. He is prepared in his own way, like maybe not in a truthful way, but as far as the conspiracy he believes in, he's very heavily read and prepared. And so most of the movie is just Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons like verbally going at it with each other, her relying on her training for what to do if as the CEO of a company you're ever abducted, and him relying on everything that he's read about and immersed himself in this conspiracy. And it is very compelling as just two people heatedly but also like restraining their own emotions, and that's why the acting in this is so good, and why I loved most of this movie. Now, the issue is the ending is, if you just take it at pure face value, I don't think very many people are going to like this ending. Now, Yorgos Lanthimos is virtually never speaking literally, so I'm looking for, okay, what is the metaphorical message that he's actually trying to do with the ending of this movie? But even then, I didn't personally love. I certainly didn't love the literal ending of this movie. I don't want to give like anything away, but like there's something that's played as a little bit of a twist, but it's the type of twist you're like, well, yeah, I mean, I saw that coming a million miles away. There's only one of two ways this can go, so it's a 50-50 coin split. It's either going to be this or that, and they chose one, and neither would have been particularly surprising. And then the main thing was, though, we see Emma Stone's character making a facial expression, not literally the last shot of this movie, but pretty darn close to it. And regardless of how I wanted to interpret this, whether I wanted to interpret it literally, whether I wanted to interpret it metaphorically, I just didn't feel like the facial expression she made fit. It didn't fit with either the text or the subtext that she had been saying through this entire movie. It didn't fit. You see her being very two-faced, right? She'll vacillate between trying to agree with Jesse Plemons' character and then trying to go directly against him. She'll vacillate between those two things depending on whatever she thinks might be most advantageous to her. And so I was like, the facial expressions she makes at this end of this movie, it didn't work for either of them. And I was just, I don't know if, like, I don't think it was an accident, but the reason I kind of feel like, well, maybe they just didn't entirely think it through is because, as I said, with Jesse Plemons' character, I thought, I loved the way that he was not dumb. The way this movie ends, he's suddenly as dumb as you would think any conspiracy nut would be in real life. And that also just didn't fit. I'm like, okay, so that also must have been intentional because neither of those two things would have just come. But so I guess that's on me. I just didn't totally get it. But like, isn't that a bit of a problem? That I really didn't get it? whatever was trying to be said about both of these characters or what they represent metaphorically, that I just didn't get it.
Yeah, it seems like if you're not reaching the conclusion that the director wanted you to, then something was missing. Yeah,
like that's what, like, it's hard for me to say that the ending was like bad outright because I'm feeling like it was intentional and I just didn't get it. But like, I don't think I'm terribly dumb at watching movies. I think I'm pretty good at picking up on subtext and on metaphors and things like that. And I'm like, I've been trying to piece it together in my head, how to make it fit. And I'm just like, maybe it's just nihilism. Is that all it is? Is it just nihilism? Was it as simple as that? Like,
well, is he one of those directors that hates his audience, right? And just wants you to suffer?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, it just kind of felt like, oh no, everything is just what you thought it was. And I'm like, I mean, if that was the message, then I don't like that message because it didn't fit with the rest of the movie. I was like, there was at least 3 other endings that were like all set up in this movie, and any of those 3 would have been more satisfying to me. But maybe that was the point. Maybe we're supposed to be left dissatisfied, and that was the entire thing. But then you're left dissatisfied. So yeah, I'm like, I don't know, 8/9 of this movie I was in love with. I just personally really didn't like the ending. And I've certainly seen other reviewers who were like, yeah, like the movie kind of just doesn't pull it all together at the end. I'm like, okay, that's the way I felt too. So anyway, okay. If you want to take your criticism, but I still think it is very, very worth watching because, like I say, the performances, the script for 8/9 of this movie I thought were fantastic.
So 2 questions. One, better or worse than Poor Things? Because I did watch that, I think, maybe based on one of your recommendations, and as well as the Academy Awards and all that.
Yeah.
That one was odd also. That one was a weird movie.
Yes, very, very different. I would actually maybe make the argument that Bugonia is the most straightforward, like, you can just follow this pure narrative that Yorgos Lanthimos has ever really done. The vast majority of this movie, certainly you can interpret it metaphorically. Certainly you can say that these characters are personifications of groups or other people or something that, like, you can certainly watch it that way. But if you want to watch it as a straightforward narrative, both ways work, all the way through this movie. So I think it's the most straightforward one that he's ever done. Maybe because he wasn't the writer on it, and maybe because it is a remake of another movie. So it's very different from Poor Things. It's very different from Kinds of Kindness. So that's about all I can say.
Did you watch it on disc, stream it? How'd you?
This one I streamed. And I will say the musical score on this definitely does stand out. This one he's chosen to do a very forceful symphonic orchestral score that's used to almost like jump scare effect at multiple times. But it is a very effective score, and so the praise for the score is well deserved as well.
All right.
Yeah. So that's what we watched. And with that, you know what? I'll just say it one more time. You can get in touch with us. question@avrant.com. Want to throw that back out there because we know we missed some emails and we hope you'll resend them or send it to us for the first time. But want to thank our listeners of the week. Listeners of the week are folks who have supported this podcast in some way. One of the ways you can support us is by coming to our website, AVRant.com, and clicking on the support AVRant link over on the right-hand side. That'll take you to PayPal, where you can make a one-time donation, or in fact, there is an option to set up a recurring donation there. But I don't actually see the donors. Only Tom sees the donors, so I don't know if we had any new PayPal donations this week. We'll catch up with those next week when Tom is back. But you can also support us financially via Patreon. You come to patreon.com/AVRant Podcast, and you can sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So we have 121 patrons over there right now, and Rohan, Andy, and Nathan let me know this week that all of them are Patreon supporters, so we want to thank you and really appreciate that financial support from everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Also, just want to shout out folks who just sent in notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. So we've got Infinite Gary, who let me know he's got a new puppy on the way, so he's very excited about that, and that'll be very nice to have some new company in the house. Dazz wrote in to say life got busy, and he got a bit behind on his podcast listening, but he's catching back up now, and while he was away, he got into gravel bike racing, so he wanted to chat with Tom about that, but Tom's not here this week, so we'll catch up with that next week. But not quite to the extent of buying a dedicated bike for the gravel bike racing purpose just yet. He's got a few things he wants to tackle before that, but it was good to hear from Dazz again. Got a note from Christian. Christian says that thankfully he is on the mend now after battling an upper respiratory infection. He says he would not wish that experience on anybody, what he went through, so he hopes we are all taking good care of ourselves. Sounds like you had a couple of trips, so I hope your health has been okay.
I'll chime in. I think I'm on my third week of having a chest cough, and I've had a coworker at work that went through pneumonia. So yeah, it is going around this winter. Be careful.
For sure. Let's not forget, COVID-19 still exists too. It's not like because the vaccines were developed more rapidly than we ever expected that the disease itself has disappeared from the face of the planet, and it can still be devastating. So yes, do be careful, folks. I agree with you, Christian. Ilango wrote in a note of gratitude. He hopes Tom is able to find the right treatment for his bad back, and Ilango says he also went through back problems of his own, and eventually he had surgery at one point, so he can definitely empathize with what Tom is going through right now. Got a note from Rohan, got a note from Andy. Andy says we can tell that he is a longtime AVRant listener because his surround speakers to this day are the Focal Little Birds. And yeah, we know for a long time there we were recommending buying the Focal Little Birds and the Birds, and even what were the bigger ones? Were they the Super Birds? Is that what they were called? The big ones? Yeah, over at Accessories for Less specifically, because they I think literally bought all the stock of the Bird series from Focal after they were discontinued, so they were much more affordable getting them from Accessories for Less for a while. So yeah, he's got those Focal Little Birds, does Andy. More notes of gratitude. We've got Karl. He noticed that the lee@avrant.com email address is no longer working, so he's like, hey, Tom, that's got to be top priority, get that fixed, which I got to let you know, Karl, and I think you know this about Tom. As soon as you say that, it now goes to the very bottom of the priority list just because you said he had to do it. For spite. Now, that's not all the notes of gratitude. We got one from Nathan. He's been a listener since the Dina days. So yes, that is definitely going right back to the very beginning of AVRant. Notes from Scott and JR. JR asks, have we watched Andor Season 2? He thinks it's awesome. I am 3 episodes from the end. So I am 9/12 of the way through.
Absolutely loved Andor Season 1 and 2. I really felt that it gave almost a poetically beautiful amount of depth to Rogue One and some of the decisions that were made, things that carried through. Even like lines of dialogue that was one sentence in the movie now became huge, major plot points of that show. So yeah, really enjoyed the depth it gave.
I have enjoyed it very, very much so far. I've loved Season 1. I have noticed Season 2, I think you'll agree, it was a bit of a slow build, right? They moved a lot of puzzle pieces around for a good 5 episodes, I would say. It was a lot of build, and then it kind of explodes. And like I said, I got 3 episodes left still to go. So it's... But a little bit of a slow build there, but worth it. It pays it off. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Tim. He was the last note that came in for this week before I cut things off. So yeah, whole bunch of names there. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate all that support and encouragement. We can use it. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. So with that, I think we're ready for some news. I've talked for a little bit. Do you want to take our first news story, Joe?
SVS has officially launched their new SB3000 Revolution and PB3000 Revolution subwoofer models. You can order them now. The SB3000 Revolution starts at $1,300 US for the black ash finish and costs $1,400 for the piano black gloss finish. That's up from $1,000 and $1,100 for the original SB3000. Its listed dimensions of 15.6 inches high by 15.2 wide by 15.6 deep without the grill, 16.8 deep with the grill, are actually the exact same height and width as the original SB3000, but 0.1 inch less deep without its grill and a full 1 inch less deep with its grill.
Yeah, so the mention they did at CES that they might be a little bit larger, I'm like, well, actually, nope, they're a tiny bit smaller, and they redesigned the grill so that the grill itself sticks out a bit less, so there you go.
Now, remind me, did the SB3000s, did they have the metal grill previously, and did they go to a cloth plastic style now?
I couldn't remember entirely clearly. I'm thinking it must have been that curved metal grill, because a full 1 inch doesn't make any sense if it's just a MDF frame with some fabric over it. So I'm thinking that was the curved metal grill that came with the original
Very
version.
Possibly. And I still have my SB16s over there, and I really like the metal grills on them personally. Continuing, the PB3000 Revolution only comes in black ash finish and costs $1,800. That's up from $1,400 price tag of the original PB3000 at 21.9 inches high by 18.3 inches wide by 23.5 inches deep without the grill, 24.7 inches deep with the grill, are identical to the original PB3000 except the grill isn't as deep, so with the grill it's 1.3 inches less deep.
Yeah, so again, that must have been that curved metal grill from the original PB3000, but yeah, the exact same cabinet dimensions if we're not considering the grill. So yeah, I don't know where the mentions of that these were ever so slightly larger came from. It is not true. If anything, they are ever so slightly smaller in terms of the depth dimension, mainly thanks to the grill. But even without the grill, the SB3000 is 0.1 of an inch less deep now. You know what I'm betting? I'm betting that's like a knob on the back of the amplifier that's like shallower depth now or something like that.
And I talked with Nick back at CE Expo when I was at the SVS booth, and he did say that this, they've continued to do kind of the trickle down technology.
Yes.
We saw the 16 become the 17, the 4000, the 5000, the 3000. Now is this 3000 Revolution. Mm-hmm. I wonder how long until we see a similar treatment to the 2000 or the 1000.
Yeah.
But yeah. So love the SVS stuff.
For sure. I'm kind of looking forward to that new 3000 Micro Revolution model that they mentioned at CES, but they did warn it's not coming out until later in the year. But it's like, yeah, the original 3000 Micro, I'm like, very impressive for how incredibly small, physically small that subwoofer is. But it's like, it truly was not a 20 hertz sub. It wasn't really a 25 hertz sub either, that original 3000 Micro.
And I've got to imagine that original one had dual 8s. I think the new one has dual 9s.
That's
and I
right.
think those are the same 9s they use on the in-wall version. So I bet there's some economies of scale in their manufacturing.
Hopefully
to use
so.
those.
I'm like, they learned a lot from making that in-wall version. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that new 3000 Micro Revolution. I think it's going to be very impressive.
Nick also hinted that that might lead to someday, no promises, but a future in-wall speakers for SVS2, which I think would be huge.
I've been bugging them every chance I've talked to them. I'm like, yep. You got to make them. And I hope they've been listening to me, because I'm like, if you make them, please have them have integrated backer boxes, because we need the integrator backer box solution.
Well, and their sub does, so absolutely.
That's right. And if they're following along from, like, say, Perlissen's designs, but trying to be a little bit more on the affordable side, which I would assume SVS would try to come out with at a more affordable price point than Perlissen's, at least the Perlissen flagship series. I don't think SVS is quite going to that extent just yet. And so, yeah, if they're following along with that type of engineering, it's like, yeah, those all had fully integrated backer boxes, and I love to see it. So I hope that's what they do.
Next story, miniDSP has entered a whole new market for themselves with the announcement of the miniDSP Tide16 Pre-Pro. Running on a fanless quad-core ARM processor and standing only 2 rack units high with purely passive cooling, the miniDSP Tide16 is a 16-channel Pre-Pro with all XLR outputs costing $3,500. And included in that price is the entire Dirac Live Suite, room correction, bass control, and ART, adaptive room technology. No extra charge. The price also includes a miniDSP UMIC 1, or you can pay $120 extra to upgrade to a UMIC 2. Or if you really do not need a UMIC 1, perhaps you already have one, they'll actually take $50 off the price.
I've never seen that type of offer from anybody before, where they're like, yeah, maybe you already own one. We actually will knock a bit off the price.
The Tide16 can be configured all the way up to a 9.1.6 speaker configuration, but if you don't need 15 speaker channels, you can also use up to 4 of the 16 XLR outputs as independent subwoofer pre-outs. I like that design.
Mm-hmm.
Dolby Atmos and DTS-X Pro decoding are on board, but only the Dolby Surround Up mixer will utilize a full 9.1.6 configuration. The version of the DTS Neural X Up mixers that's on board tops out at using 11 speakers.
Yeah.
Also not on board are RO3D, so sad, or IMAX Enhanced. Costs had to be saved somewhere, right?
And you know what? I am not so upset that if you're going to cut any features out, that those would be the ones. I think it kind of makes sense.
And speaking of some cost savings, you won't find the Tide16 to be an HDMI powerhouse. It only has 3 inputs, 1 output, and they're all HDMI 2.0 bandwidth, so no 4K 120 pass-through here. miniDSP suggests that for HDMI 2.1 sources, you plug those directly into the display and rely on an eARC to send the audio signals into the Tide16. They're also limiting the DACs to 48 kHz, 24-bit, and the number of other inputs is limited. 1 set of RCA in, 1 set of XLR in, 2 optical, and 2 digital coax, plus USB and Bluetooth. But optional rack ears are included in the box, as is an IR remote that your universal remote system can easily learn. In addition to DRAC, it has all of miniDSP's own filters and processing options, so a very reasonable set of compromises and decisions as far as we can tell. The Tide16 should start shipping in mid-February.
Yeah, so we did mention the price, but want to highlight it, $3,500, which, as some people have pointed out, that's $500 less than the HTP-1 from Monoprice Monolith, which was definitely one of the most affordable pre-pros that could do 9.1.6, right, beyond 11 speakers, and had DRAC built in. But the HTP-1 from Monolith was DRAC live room correction. You could upgrade it to bass control, but you cannot upgrade it to art, and the license that came with it was just for room correction, whereas this Tide16 from miniDSP is the entire DRAC suite, including all the way up to art, the active room treatment system there. So price-wise, more than competitive, I would say. Also on the front of this thing, it is an OLED display, a little OLED display on the front of this, only 2 rack units high, so it's not a gigantic display, but that is a little OLED display there. And then, yeah, when they mention their own miniDSP processing, one of the cool things they've got in there is a fully customizable matrixing suite, meaning that let's say your surround speaker is positioned considerably farther behind your seat than might be ideal. If you have that side surround and also a front wide, or even just your front left speaker and your side surround left speaker, but that side surround left speaker is like farther back. Maybe there's a pole in the way, maybe there's a window in the way, and you were just forced to put it farther back. You can manually do some matrixing so that when a sound is playing out of that surround left channel, it'll matrix some of the sound into the front wide left or the front left speaker so that it virtually, stereo location, even though it doesn't perfectly work when it's to your sides, but kind of pulls that sound forward a little bit so that it seems as though a sound that's dedicated to, say, the surround left is now coming from directly beside you, even though the speaker itself is physically farther back than you might like. So that is not unlike the idea that Trinov uses for their speaker reposition. Now, that is not automated in the miniDSP. That is like a manual setup thing, but it's just that you can do that. You can say, hey, when this channel plays, you don't necessarily have to have that sound come only from the associated speaker that goes with that channel. You can actually matrix it so that it plays out of more than one speaker. So pretty interesting stuff that they're doing there.
It is really interesting also from the standpoint of it's definitely not a receiver company that also made a preamp version of the same piece of gear. This is a really new cutting edge, purpose-built, very hobbyist type of a piece of gear. This thing doesn't have an AM/FM tuner in it. It doesn't have, just a lot of the stuff that you would expect to find in an old school preamp. So, yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't mention having streaming internet radio services built in to this either. It does support a whole host of different codecs, but I think they're counting on you having your own source devices that you plug into this.
Yeah, which I like. You're going to use an Apple TV. You're going to use some kind of a movie disc player or video game system or whatever it is. You don't need all of that. There's a lot of redundancy that looks like it's been stripped out of it.
So the only other thing I would mention is just something to be aware of. If you were going to have 15 speakers, right? So 9 floor level speakers, 6 overhead speakers, because there are a total of 16 XLR outputs on the back of it. If you did that, you would be limited to a single subwoofer output. So when you're talking,
you get a mini DSP then and just, hook up 4 of them off of that, right?
That's just it. You add another mini DSP device and you can do it that way. But if you were using only this one, and so you might be like, okay, is it worth having Dirac Live bass control and Dirac Art if I have a mono subwoofer out, that's coming from this because I have 15 speakers? Now look, if you're doing 13 speakers, you can have 3 fully independent subwoofers. If you're doing 11 speakers, you could have, 4, even though you'd have 5 leftover pre-outs, you could do 4 because that's the max they can do for independent subs. But this is where the whole argument of, well, you know what? If you actually have some genuinely full range speakers as part of your setup, or you could even do the thing where, you send the pre-out signal into a subwoofer and the amplifier for speakers, or if you have like a subwoofer that allows for a high pass filtered output that goes through the sub, you can create genuinely full range speakers in other parts of the room. So now all of a sudden you have like, more than one full range speaker somewhere in the room, plus the dedicated subwoofer output. Now Art can really do its thing when you have all of that together. So there's multiple ways around that limitation of there being 16 XLR pre-outs and not any more than that. It's not like 15 speakers plus 4, but like Joe said, you add one of mini DSP's own devices with Art built into or Dirac built into that, and you can have 4 independent subs that way.
So did they roll that out at CES?
I didn't see a mention of this.
I think I just saw a press release about it, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Next story, and I just read about this today. Sony and TCL announced the signing of a memorandum of understanding that will create a new joint venture between the two companies. TCL will own 51% of the shares, while Sony will hold on to the other 49%, meaning TCL will have majority control of Sony and Bravia TVs and home audio equipment. Holy crap.
Yeah.
If the deal goes through, the new joint venture will operate product design, development, manufacturing, and sales on a global level. Given that this is not yet a binding agreement, further details are scarce at this point. TCL CSOT was already the primary supplier of LCD panels for Sony TVs, but clearly this new joint venture will see TCL becoming much more involved beyond just supplying the raw panels. Thoughts on this? It's kind of crazy that this major leader is, selling off a big part of their, what I perceive as a big part of their brand.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Sony's been a little bit opaque about their financials for quite a few years now, but the sort of like common thing that's said about them is how the PlayStation division is almost propping up that company as a whole in some regard. Certainly it doesn't appear that like the TV division on its own is some kind of gigantic profit generator for them. And their market share has been shrinking over time. Mm-hmm. While the Chinese manufacturers like TCL and Hisense have been gaining market share, it's like Samsung hasn't gone down much. LG's gone down a tiny bit, but it's largely been the Japanese TV brands that have lost a lot of the market share that's gone to the Chinese brands. So this, like, just the overall sense of, hey, TCL is now kind of taking over, 51% anyway, of Sony's television division. It's like purely financially, I can see how something like that could have occurred. Sony hasn't been like manufacturing the actual panels in their TVs for a long, long time now, right? They don't have their LCD fabrication plant. They shut that down before the Korean companies shut their LCD manufacturing plants down.
But you also think about the profitability on TVs has got to be so negligible, right? That there's just no money in them. So it makes sense to divest themselves. Obviously there are big names. People will still go in and want to buy a Sony TV. Yep. But if you didn't make any money making them, why keep doing it, right?
Well, and it's, this is not as though Sony is not involved. They still own almost half of this joint venture. So the notion that like all of the Sony processing that they're lauded for, all of their motion processing that people still, say is the best out of the consumer TVs. It's like, it's not like that's going away. I think TCL must see value in that. Otherwise, why would they bother acquiring, 51% of this venture?
But how much of that technology will become a TCL, will make its way into the TCL 100%, or will TCL only be making TVs with this joint partnership? I'm just curious to see how it all plays out.
Those are the type of details we definitely don't have yet at this point. So that would be pure guess job on that. Not even speculation, pure guess. But yeah, I mean, financially, I think it makes some amount of sense. Now, it's also important to know, it's like, this is not Sony. This is not even Sony
Electronics.
This is Sony
TVs.
This is Sony TVs and home audio, which is pretty significant that it includes the home audio as well. But
I wonder if there'll be any impact to projectors. Probably not.
It doesn't sound like it, because those are a separate division. And yeah, this is certainly not Sony Pictures. It's not PlayStation. It's not all of the oodles of appliances that Sony makes. It's not the car division. So Sony still has a lot that is owned by only Sony. But yeah, TVs and home audio, 51% going to be owned by TCL coming up.
Yeah, and I remember that, a lot of those brands, remember, Vizio, which I know Walmart eventually bought, but so many of those brands, got a foothold at that entry-level bargain price and then got better and better and better. And so obviously that's, TCL's kind of roadmap also.
Yeah, for sure.
Next story, still Sony. Sony Pictures also inked a deal with Netflix that will see Netflix become the exclusive streaming service for Sony Pictures for all regions around the world, starting in 2029. With the final existing contracts with other streaming services ending in 2032, Sony Pictures will still have a theatrical window, followed by a sales and rental and video on demand window. But after that, they're going to Netflix for streaming, no matter where you live. Better get your subscription now.
Yeah, I mean, for me in Canada, it was already kind of this way. Certainly, Sony Pictures and Netflix were buddy. Where I'm living, if you were going to find Sony Pictures on streaming, they were coming to Netflix first. But this is now going to be the global agreement that's going to be the case. I have noticed that the Spider-Man movies that Sony Pictures produced, that those have gone off of Disney Plus in Canada. Some of them were there for a while. They never got the most recent Spider-Man movie that's part of the MCU that never came to Disney Plus at any time, at least in Canada. But then, all of those Spider-Man movies are off the service now. So yeah, it seems like they're pulling it in a little bit, and they're being like, yeah, Netflix is the home of Sony Pictures now.
Well, I'm curious to see if there's going to be impact then to their physical disc. Will Sony's been known to make some of the best 4K discs out there. Will that continue? Will that all go away? Will they stop making discs?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Another news story, and Netflix has made some slight changes to their bid to gain ownership of Warner Brothers. They've now officially stated that they will commit to a 45-day theatrical window for Warner Brothers films. No more 14 or 17-day theatrical run talk. Mm-hmm. And they've adjusted their offer to be an all-cash offer. No increase in the price of their bid, but it won't be a mix of cash and Netflix stock going to the Warner Brothers shareholders anymore. If they agree to sell to Netflix, it'll be all cash, and unlike Paramount, Netflix does not need to rely on outside investors in order to raise the money. It's nice to have deep pockets.
Yeah, they did mention how if Netflix is successful in this bid to purchase Warner Brothers, they will be taking on, this is not all from Warner Brothers, but their total debt load will rise to $85 billion. But their market cap is over $400 billion, whereas Paramount's market cap is at $12.7 billion, and their debt load would rise to over $90 billion if they took on Warner Brothers Discovery. So it's Netflix, you can kind of see how they could absorb that kind of debt. The Paramount one, I'm like, how do you absorb debt that's 5 times higher than the net value of your company? So, yeah.
I kick myself all the time I remember when Netflix came out and they had 80 DVDs that you could get in the mail, right. And that company became public. And I told my wife, I'm like, that's going to put, Blockbuster and Hollywood out of business someday. Yep. And, oh my goodness, it's gotten so huge. Anyways, let's move on to comments, shall we? Mm-hmm. Christian, we recommended some ELAC debut tower speakers to him. They hit the spot. They were the right price, the right size, and they blend perfectly with his other speakers. But in a way, that felt underwhelming, because they just fit right in. And they sound great, but it's also as if nothing changed from the other speakers in his system. Is that the right feeling to have, Rob?
I mean, it was the goal. It was what he asked for. So we achieved what was asked for. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. You're like, maybe you're hoping that secretly, it's like such a difference and an upgrade in the sound that you'll be like compelled to change all of your other speakers too. Maybe that was going on in the back of his mind.
If you put a good neutral speaker in, it sounds like other good neutral speakers.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I've got to say, yeah, if you get good neutral speakers, they do not and should not sound wildly different from one another. That's kind of the entire goal of sort of objective-based, measurement-based recommendations. So yeah, we fit the profile, but yeah, slightly let down. I get where you're coming from, Christian.
Christian continues, also real quick, should he use Arting's settings for his LG B5 or someone else's?
I mean, if you want like industry accuracy, I linked him to Vincent Teo, HDTV Test, because he ran through his settings for LG OLEDs, and you're not going to get better to the industry standards than that, other than actually hiring someone to do a professional for your unit, professional calibration. But in terms of adjusting the user settings to be as close as they're easily able to be out of the box, yeah, that's the one. So I personally agree. Yeah, like ratings, I love a lot of their settings, but I don't quite know why they always target 200 nits for SDR. I mean, I know why. It's because they're targeting a well-lit room, and they don't think that 120 nits looks bright enough in a well-lit room, but it's just a little bit strange to me that they don't even mention what the settings would be for the industry standard of 120 nits for SDR. They always target 200. So for that reason, they very often choose a like default picture mode that I don't think is like the optimal starting point, whereas Vincent Teo always picks the one that I also agree is the optimal starting point. So in this case, it's very easy. In LG B5, you put it in filmmaker mode and you're basically done. You turn off the energy saving, you put it in filmmaker mode, and you don't need to do much else besides that to have a very accurate picture out of the box.
Okay, time to sell some gear. Adam had a comment. Anyone will want to buy Adam's used Outlaw audio model 976 7.2 channel Pre-Pro? He heard AVRant listener Dan mention that he was looking to sell his Emotiva XMC2 Pre-Pro. So through us, Adam and Dan got in touch. Now Adam is hoping the same thing might happen for some other AVRant listener who'd like to buy the Outlaw model 976. Adam's initial asking price is only $450 US, but he's willing to discuss, and shipping costs will depend on where it ends up going.
Sure.
Now the disclosures. It's had one minor HDMI bug, which is that its HDMI board is old enough that it glitches if you plug in a source that utilizes HDMI quick media switching, or QMS. Mm-hmm. Outlaw has actually said that they can do an HDMI board replacement that fixes this issue, but that costs extra, of course. So if you're interested, you can get in touch with us, and we'll put you in contact with Adam.
Yeah, question at avrant.com. This is a bit of an exception. I am not going to turn us into a classified ads podcast. But yeah, we've talked to Adam many, many times, and he did have the whole experience of connecting with Dan via the podcast. They wouldn't have reached each other otherwise. So I'm like, okay, we're kind of continuing on that story. But yes, please don't take this as free reign of like every piece of gear that you want to sell that we're going to mention on the podcast for you. That's not the case. This is an exception to the rule, but we're happy to do it for Adam.
No AVRant marketplace here.
That's right.
Okay. I see a comment that you made about something you and I were going to talk about. I want to maybe push that towards the end of our discussion so we can get into some questions from other listeners.
That's fine by me. Yeah, whenever you want to jump to that topic, you just let me know, because we don't have to literally get through everything I put on this list, because we got oodles this week, and we very often leave a handful for next week, and that's totally fine to do.
All 19 pages must be read. So, questions. Nothing from last week because email wasn't working. So new for this week. We're going to start with number 1, Kenny. Kenny's friend is an AVRant listener who suggested asking us for a recommendation. Kenny has a projector and he attempted to install it himself, but a mistake was made and the placement was not correct. So he'd like to hire a pro to come in and do the projector installation correctly. He's in Metro Atlanta, Georgia area, so Rob emailed a couple of quick suggestions just based on online reputation. But when you're looking to hire an installer, what's the approach to finding a good one, Rob?
I mean, honestly, I want to defer to you a bit here, Joe, because I think the answer you're going to suggest is probably the same thing that I did, and you're actually more the expert on it than I am. So what do you say, Joe?
So Cedia.org is a great resource. You can find Cedia certified designers, installers, all that on their website. Look them up by your local area. I think that'd be a great starting point. You can also then look at, Google reviews and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But, most competent installers should be able to hang a projector correctly, get it aligned, set everything up, make sure that you're level, plumb, all of those kind of things, and, get it set up so it shows correctly on the screen.
Mm-hmm. It can sometimes be more complicated than you might imagine, though. All sorts of things can be involved, including occasionally sometimes some actual construction needs to be done to the structure. I mean, if we're dealing with a projector that has no lens shift capability, and you don't want to rely on a whole bunch of keystone adjustment to get that image squared up on your screen and sacrifice some of the resolution of the native panel in order to do that, you have to be careful in the planning. Some projectors don't have a huge amount of zoom lens range as well. Sometimes you're dealing with a projector that the native panel actually has a different aspect ratio than the screen, and all sorts of things can lead to you not being 100% calculating that on your own before putting it up there. And a very good qualified installer should be able to do all of those things beforehand. But if they don't, they should be able to correct it, and hopefully not at extra charge, because they should be nailing that down the first time. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking up on Cedia.org. I also do. I was thinking that you would mention it, but like checking out on AVS Forum, it really never hurts to head over there and ask the question of people in the area, because AVS Forum is a large forum dedicated to this type of thing. AV Nirvana is a good resource as well, a forum that you can use there. And just be like, hey, does someone have a personal pick that they can do? So the couple of companies that I forwarded to, very good Google reviews, prominent on Cedia, names that I've heard of, but I have not personally hired them because I don't live in the greater Atlanta, Georgia area, so I don't have that type of experience. But I was fairly confident that the couple I pointed him to via email are capable of handling this, and a couple I suggested at different levels, one that's more of a planning and can do a renovation if that's actually what's involved, and one that would just be coming into your house and hanging the projector on the existing structure.
Yeah, and I'll just throw one other caveat on there. The less expensive the projector, probably the more you're going to spend on the install. Right. Because most projectors that have, powered zoom, powered focus, a lot of offset capability, a wider throw range are going to be your more expensive projectors. The ones that it's a manual zoom, manual focus, those kind of things are cheaper projectors that are, it's just going to take a lot more to get them perfect.
But I mean, sometimes if you're buying a projector off of Amazon, which you can absolutely do, and it shows up at your door and you're thinking you're going to install it, and then you're like, wait a second, how do I actually route and hide the cables that need to go to this thing? How do I deal with, I'm ceiling mount this projector and, oh wait, how do I get power to it? Am I just running an extension cord? Lots of things you might not have thought of beforehand that a Cedia installer can definitely handle for you. So yeah, one good recommendation there. Why don't we trade back and forth reading the questions? I think that makes sense for us to do. So second question this week is from Dazz. We haven't heard from a while, but as he mentioned in the notes of gratitude there, he's come back. He's returned to us. So Dazz Andrea's eldest son recently moved out, and he's renting a house with his friends. Dazz made good on a promise to set them up with a surround sound system that's consisting of his old Onkyo TXNR 646 AV receiver and a set of Pioneer Andrew Jones towers, center, and bookshelf surrounds. Drea also got them a turntable for Christmas. So, multi-part question here. Dazz did not supply his son and his friends with a subwoofer. They're going to buy that on their own. They're not actually all that limited in terms of budget, but they're still not looking to overspend either. So this is a fairly open living room type of scenario, so it's not a tiny enclosed amount of air. What is a budget-minded, but not overly so, don't worry if this costs some money, but more towards the slightly budget end of the scale, but a really solid subwoofer model that we would feel comfortable recommending. Yeah. Oop. We've got a muted microphone. I don't think that's just the call.
Looking at the notes, using SVS lineup as sort of a reference, we'd recommend hopefully finding a PB3000 performance at PB2000 Pro price or lower, i.e. under $1,200.
Yeah.
Tone Winner and Monoprice Monolith have been rocked by tariffs. Tone Winners D4000 and now priced at $13.75. Most Monolith subs are out of stock. So
yeah, it's just I wanted to mention that because I mean you think monoprice Monolith value leader for sure. I mean physically very large subs, but that's one of the ways like we often say it's like I want deep extension, I want like a low price. And I want a small size. Well, you can get 2 out of those 3 things, but you can't get all 3. So they traded the just using the physically large cabinet in order to get the deep extension at the lower price. Tone Winner, a very similar thing, but the price on those has risen so much, and it coincides 100% with the tariffs that were going on there. So they're just not the same bang for buck that they were at one point.
Do we know the kind of room that Dazz's son is putting this into?
So I don't know it entirely. I remember him mentioning it's kind of an open living room type of structure. So
you're using an older Onkyo receiver, and the Pioneer Andrew Jones towers. That they were nice speakers. They sounded great, but they weren't output monsters by any sense. But so looking to shop new, we've got some recommendations. But I'll also throw in there that if you're using older used gear, places like Marketplace, Craigslist, all the forums have used equipment and gear. Man, there's some great deals to be found out there. Definitely, especially sticking with some of the the better names. If you can get your subwoofer, take a listen to it before you buy it. Usually if it's working, it's going to keep working. So just throwing that out there also for your son to consider.
For sure, yeah. Because, I mean, there are lots of older model SVSs, HSUs, Monoliths, Tone Winners, Power Sound Audio. Like there's lots of them out there on the market because the real bass heads are seemingly constantly upgrading their subwoofers even if they really don't need to. So yes, I definitely agree with that advice. But if you do just want to go to a website and purchase brand new, because that's just the way that you want to do it, I would probably point you first these days to RSL. For a larger room, their Speedwoofer 12S, $885, and that includes shipping in the contiguous USA. So I'm not seeing a ton of subs that have that output capability. It's very akin to at least a PB2000 Pro. Measurement-wise, CEA 2010-wise, I think it's like 1 dB more than the PB2000 Pro, thanks to just the slightly larger cabinet volume. So you're getting just a tiny bit more output, but at a significantly lower price point. I will just mention, though, that Speedwoofer 12S, very, very pointy corners. It is certainly a sub where if you bang your knee into that thing, you're going to scrape some skin off. Just a thing to be aware of. But yeah, of course,
it's too funny that you mentioned that. My youngest son did get a couple of staples in his head when he and his brother were wrestling around some JBL synthesis subs I had at one time. But yeah, watch those sharp edges.
Yep, no kidding. Yeah, I remember Tom and I both remember the Axiom subwoofers from back in the day, and it's like the incredibly sharp, pointy corners on those things. And the RSL Speedwoofer 12S reminds me of that. But yeah, the other value champ has remained for ages and ages. HSU, Shoe Research. Yeah, if you're looking at their VTF2 Mark V, which is their 12-inch dual-ported sub, very akin to a PB2000 type of output, $759 plus $90 shipping. So very much in the same ballpark of price. With them though, you have the option of going even more output, the 15-inch model, the VTF3 Mark V HP, that's at $1,050 plus another $100 for shipping. So price is a little bit higher, but not astronomical. If you're talking bang for a buck today in terms of what you can buy, I don't know if you can do a whole lot better than the VTF3 Mark V HP from Shoe Research. But yeah, then their biggest 15-inch model that's still ported and doesn't have the gigantic supercharger and a much higher price, the VTF TN1, trading height for footprint. So if that's useful to you, it's a taller sub, but with a smaller footprint. But that's $1,250 plus another $100 in shipping. But I think between those options, if you're buying new, that's what's going to make sense out of there. But yeah, I like Joe's suggestion because all the rest of the gear was used, by you, sent directly to your son and his friends, but there's no reason you can't pair it up with a very good used sub.
I'll also throw out that if you're in the Anaheim area visiting Disneyland, Shoe Research is only about 10 minutes away.
Right. All right. So this is still Dazz, so I'll carry on here. That Onkyo and Pioneer setup used to be in Dazz's own living room system. So that's in need of replacement now. And for the moment...
This is how we upgrade.
This is exactly it. Great excuse. He's using an old receiver to power a pair of Ascend Acoustics HTM200 SE speakers that he stole from their surround back positions in his basement theater. He does plan to put the Ascend speakers back as surround backs once the new living room speakers are purchased, so this isn't a case where they can come there permanently. The living room setup is really just a TV and an Apple TV 4K. He's got a pair of SVS SP2000 subs that he can use in the living room after he finishes upgrading his basement home theater subs to bigger, louder models that'll go into the basement theater. So again, one thing gets stolen from one area but gets utilized in another. So he's honestly just looking for a pair of speakers. He does not want a sound bar, doesn't like that form factor. And since he's been using the HTM200 SE speakers just on their own, he's come to the conclusion he'd like something with a little bit more output, a little bit higher sensitivity than those HTM200 SE speakers. But the speakers still need to be compact. They in fact need to be less than 14 inches tall because they're going into actual bookshelves that are on either side of the TV, and that is the shelf height, and apparently these are not adjustable shelves, so 14 inches tall is a factor that has to be considered. He was thinking he might power the new living room speakers with a Weem amp. He would have to buy that. So what do we think of all that? Should he go with the Weem amp idea, and if so, which speakers should he get to go along with that?
So I'm looking at a couple of links that you had put here, starting with the, over at Crutchfield, the Kanto Ren speakers at $700 a pair. Currently on sale at $500 a pair. They're only 11 inches tall.
Yeah, so I just, my first thought here was self-powered speakers. That's what these Kanto Ren are. You would not need the WIM amp. You would not need any other sort of amplifier or AV receiver. These amplify themselves. And what I like here is these have an HDMI ARC input. So if you just want to use ARC coming from your TV, you plug all your sources into your TV, you have an HDMI ARC connection that goes directly out to these self-powered speakers. It's ready to go. I'm a big fan of these Kanto Ren speakers. I think they sound very, very good. Audioholics recently reviewed them, and they're like, objectively, they measure very, very well. So I don't think I'm off the mark with those Kanto Ren speakers.
Do those have a subwoofer output also?
They do have a sub out. They don't come with a sub, but they just have an RCA output. They also do come with a remote, so you can use them as TV speakers nicely. You will, of course, have to plug them into power because they are self-powered. But yeah, they're the right size. They also come in a variety of colors if you want some funky colors. They got blue and orange in addition to regular black and white. They've got more of a mid-gray as well, so lots of looks that can go along. So I'm a big fan of those. I think the price is very enticing, and you wouldn't need to buy anything else to go with those.
So one of our suggestions, SVS Prime Wireless Pro at $900 pair, but are too tall. So sad.
I mean, you could, of course, put any bookshelf speakers on their sides, but the SVS Prime Wireless Pro are actually ever so slightly trapezoidal as well. So they're not the ideal one to lay on their sides. But yeah, there are other options beyond these. Yep.
The Klipsch the Fives too. These are going to be coming out in spring, and they're at $1,400 a pair.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit like that's starting to get kind of spendy, and they're also not available to purchase right now. These are the smallest of the new second generation self-powered speakers from Klipsch. But yes, as you would expect from Klipsch, high sensitivity, more output than you might expect from speakers of this size. And one cool thing about these is these are the first, I mean, I'm not saying they are the first, but they're the first ones I've noted where it's just a pair. They are just a pair of speakers. But again, HDMI ARC input, and these can actually accept a Dolby Atmos signal. So, I mean, obviously you're not getting like discrete Atmos here, but they can decode Dolby Atmos and play it back, which, as I mentioned, is kind of useful when so much is coming over streaming now. And to actually get the highest bit rate from your streaming service, you'd want to use the Dolby Atmos soundtrack. When you switch to either the 5.1 or the stereo soundtrack, it's at lower bit rate, and you're not necessarily getting exactly the same quality as you do from the maximum bit rate that's coming with the Atmos stream. So that's kind of a cool feature of those, but I'm not sure the price is quite right. And then I wanted to give like one option for if he's like, yeah, I'm dedicated, because I'm not against you using the Weem amp. I think that's a pretty cool little device. The app is really good. It costs less than the Sonos. There's actually like EQ that you can do. It's manual EQ, but there's parametric EQ in the Weem amp. So if you want to apply EQ, that can all be done in there. So I'm not against you using that, and I wanted to have a speaker choice that could go with that as well. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say those clips, I got to imagine, are going to give you a lot more output than the HTM 200 SEs also.
Yeah, I mean, the HTM 200 SEs, those are a pair of 4-inch woofers, which is about the equivalent of like a 5.5-inch single diameter driver, so slightly larger than the 5 1/4 that we're seeing in the rest of these. But in terms of that, but it's also a sealed design, so you're not getting a whole bunch of bass output, and then you're fighting that trapped amount of air that's inside there. So yeah, they're not gigantic output champs, and certainly not bass output champs. And right now, he's, I think, using them on their own, so that might be part of it.
Mm-hmm. So then you're talking about the reference Premier RP500s?
Yeah, because you'd have to go with the smallest. These are the 5 1/4-inch driver in the reference Premier series in order to match that 14-inch maximum height, and these just make it under 14 inches tall. But they do. They're like 13 inches and 9/16, I think, is what the specs say, but that's under 14. I just wanted to mention, because over at Crutchfield right now, they still have stock of the first generation. Like, Klipsch just announced the 3rd generation of the reference Premier series at CES. Those aren't available to purchase right now, and most places are selling the 2nd generation, which Crutchfield is too, but they're still selling the 1st generation. So, and there's nothing wrong with the RP500M from the 1st generation of the Klipsch reference Premier series. And $300 for a pair of those, I'm like, that's a steal. That's a steal of a deal. So if money is like a priority, I feel very comfortable. Although in your case, you're now spending some additional money to get the WIM amp to power them. So then they're costing just as much as a combo as the Kanto Ren that are on sale for $500 a pair. But either way, you don't have to overspend to get something that works really nicely here.
Great.
So carrying on, there's one last section from Dazz here. Upstairs in the master bedroom, they have a nook area where Drea enjoys listening to music and watching TV. It, again, is just a TV and an Apple TV 4K right now. And he'll likely move the small Pioneer 8-inch sub into the nook, since that used to be used in their living room, but then he's going to upgrade those to the SB2000s once he upgrades the basement sub. So everything gets shoved up a floor in their house. So once again, zero desire for a sound bar form factor, and this cozy corner doesn't need much in the way of raw output, but he'd like the pair of speakers to be easily wall mountable. Do we think a WIM amp would work well in this location, and which wall mountable speakers would we recommend? And yeah, this is where, like, the self-powered speakers that I just mentioned, like, you could certainly put those on shelves. You could attach a shelf to the wall and have it that way. But all of them are a bit on the deep side, and they don't have like integrated wall mounts. So here, I'm perfectly fine if you want to go with a WIM amp. And then, maybe this is a case where you end up ordering some speakers and a sub together, because I have a suggestion for which speakers to get.
Yeah, looking at the RSL speakers.
Yeah, RSL. Why not? The CG3M bookshelf speakers come with a keyhole mount on the back. They're ever so slightly less than 6 inches in depth. They're $105 each, so $210 for a pair of those. Maybe you order them along with a Speedwoofer 12S that's going to your son, and you can have a little bit of a package deal there with a slight discount that comes from ordering speakers and sub at the same time. Available in both a black and a white finish, with a nice houndstooth gray grille that goes on the front if you go with the white finish. It's a very stylish look available with those CG3M bookshelf speakers from RSL.
That's a good looking speaker. I'd show that to your wife and see if she likes the way they look.
Yeah, front slot ported, so no problem having those hanging right on the walls. So yeah, I like those speakers a lot, and I think they'd work well in the nook.
All right, moving on to question number 3 from Nathan. Nathan wants a wireless headset that he'll be using with his computer. He wants it to be a pair of over-the-ear
circumoral, yeah, that's the technical term.
headphones that sound good. He wants them to be comfortable to wear for long sessions. He wants to be able to get up and walk away from his computer for a bit without interrupting the connection. And then on the microphone side of things, he doesn't care whether it has a boom mic or not. Either way is fine by him, but he wants to be able to mute his microphone directly on the headset itself. Right now, he's using a Sony WH-1000 XM2, which checked the boxes on the headphone side of things, but he can only mute its mic by controlling that on the computer itself. He's seen office headsets with boom mics where if you just flip up the mic, that mutes the mic without disconnecting the audio completely, but they all seem to be on-ear designs, not over-ear. So do we have any recommendations, or should he maybe just look into getting a remote that would be able to mute his mic on the computer itself?
I mean, that is an option, right? But then you have to remember to take the remote with you, and it's another thing in your hand when you get up and walk away. I'm taking a little bit of a liberty here because I'm like, oh, okay, this is an owner of some Sony WH-1000 XM2 speakers. That means he's not afraid of spending over $100 on some speakers, because sometimes people are like, you're going to ask me to spend, several $100s for this thing. But I'm like, if you're a Sony WH-1000 owner, I'm like, okay, you're not opposed to spending some money. So I did think of Astro Gaming, because Astro Gaming's wireless headsets do have the option of, it's got a boom microphone, but you just flip that microphone up. You physically just flip it up, and that mutes the mic, but it's not that the audio cuts out. It's just muted the mic by physically flipping up the boom. It's a very intuitive way to do it, and now that boom mic is out of the way, and it's easy to flip back down, and now you're back into game chat. So the one that would be over the ear, though, is their flagship series, the Astro A50. And Logitech actually purchased Astro Gaming a while back. So you're going to see that it's the Logitech website, but Astro is still a separate division within Logitech. So it's the Astro A50. They're up to Generation 5 now. One other thing I really like about the Astro A50s is that he was definitely talking about using these with a PC. But if you have both an Xbox and a PlayStation, you'll find there's a lot of headsets that work with either PlayStation or Xbox, but not both, because Xbox demands their own proprietary wireless connection signal thingy. And you'll very often find that a headset is not universal across all platforms. The Astro A50s are, because they actually have 3 separate USB inputs, so you can have the connected to 3 separate consoles at once, and you can control which one you're listening to on the headset itself with a dedicated button that flips between those 3 different USB-C inputs, and one of them is dedicated for Xbox, and it'll work across all consoles and PCs with that flip-up boom mic, with the over-the-ear sound, with a semi-closed back, and actually you can buy an optional backplate piece if you want to make them fully closed headphones. So it's like all the options you could possibly want are here. The only downside is they're $300, right? So it's like, yeah, you're spending some money, but you're like checking every possible box. Available in both black and white. Did also want to mention there is an Astro A50X. The difference there is that the X includes HDMI inputs on that base. I don't think you need those, but they are in fact full 4K 120 pass-through HDMI 3 inputs on the Astro A50X, but the price goes up $100. It's $400 for the Astro A50X, but I don't think you actually need that one, but I'll mention it because it does exist.
Yeah, and a lot of times it costs a little bit more to get all the options that you want to have, but that sounds like it fits the bill.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the idea of you could do what would you need to actually do like a remote that would connect to your computer and just mute the microphone for you? I'm not actually sure what device to point to for that.
Yeah, I haven't played with that side of things.
There's got to be a home automation type thing that could just be like programmed to do that function for you. But yeah, I don't have exactly the one to point you to. But yeah, at least we had one headset. Now, if you come back to me and say, hey, that just cost too much, $300 is not what I was looking to spend, then I understand. But for the moment, that one checks all the boxes, unless the price is too high. All right, next question.
Question number 4 comes from Ilango. Ilango lives in Canada, but he still has family in the States. So over the holidays, he was visiting family in the USA, and he took the opportunity to collect a pair of HSU VTF TN1 subwoofers and drive them back across the border himself. Since his enclosed and highly soundproofed home theater room in his basement is about 3,400 cubic feet in total air volume, he actually intends to use 4 of the TN1 subwoofers when all is said and done. He pre-wired to be able to put 1 sub in each corner. But for now, he has just the pair of TN1 subwoofers, and that's mainly because they're so large he can only fit 2 of them in his car.
Oh, man, logistics, practicality.
And Ilango, I think you said you had back problems once before. You got to be careful with those subwoofers. First time I pulled my back was carrying 4 subwoofers at one time in the car audio days. Anyway, so part A. By default, the TN1 subs have some pretty beefy rubber feet. In addition to those, he put some fairly thick felt and foam moving pads under those rubber feet just to make it easier to position the subs diagonally opposite corners for now and be able to access their rear panels if needed.
Yep.
And you
So
can
we
see
sent a
some
couple
pictures on
photos.
screen.
We can see the examples. It is already, they can't have been on there for too long, but it's already compressed those sliding pads somewhat.
Yeah.
That foam has not withstood the
Yeah.
weight of the mighty TN1 subs.
So the question is, do we think they are sufficiently damped or decoupled, or should he replace the default feet with the SVS sound path isolation feet? I can tell you just looking at it that you've already squished the heck out of those pads. Those are hard rubber. You're not getting much decoupling through those. I've used a ton of the SVS sound path isolation feet on almost every subwoofer we install on some of our projects, and I think that they're great. They really do help to keep you from shaking the floor or the cabinet or whatever it is that you're mounting it to. So I would, they're $50. Get a set, try them out, do some A/B comparison.
Yeah. I mean, I never say, hey, spend $50 if you really don't need to, but we also know the sort of, price points that Ilango works in, and this is a barely cry once if you buy once type of thing for what you'd be doing here. $200 in total once you get all four of them, but you're going to spread that out a little bit because it's $100 now and $100 later. I don't think you'll regret it if you did it. I think if you went with the SoundPath isolation feet, that overall you'd be pleased with the purchase, because we see the evidence. Like I say, they can't have been on those pads for all that long just yet, and we see how much force is coming down on those foam moving pads, and they have not withstood the amount of weight. Also an indication that you're not getting a ton of cushioning from those default rubber feet if that's the amount of pressure that they've put onto those foam pads. So that's your indication that all of that downward force is going into your floor right now. So it's not that there's no damping whatsoever. Rubber is going to have some amount of damping, but it's, like Joe says, pretty hard rubber, and you're not getting a ton right now. I think it's worth the price.
Next part of his question, as the VTF in their name implies, variable tuning frequency, you can vary the tuning of the TN1 subs by optionally plugging one or both of its two downward firing 4-inch flared ports. He doesn't have any intent of running them sealed, but HSU specifies that with both ports open, the TN1 is tuned for flat response down to 20 Hz. But with one port plugged, the tuning is lowered to 15 Hz. But at the expense of some maximum output capability. So how should he run his subs? Once he has all four, he's hoping he will actually be able to hit full cinema reference volume, meaning 115 dB peaks, if he wants to, but he also had it in mind that he might like extension down to 16 Hz. Is that going to be genuinely doable? And which tuning mode will be best? Do you have the graphs pulled up there?
Yeah, we can show the guys. This is borrowed from Audioholics. This is CEA 2010 standards for measuring. This is being referenced to a 2-meter ground plane measurement. So, I mean, from this, we're seeing that, in the two ports open, which, look, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. That's how I would run these subs. I'd run them both ports open. I'm going for all the output at maximum or at minimum distortion. But it's not a gigantic difference across the entire range. We're seeing the extension go down deeper with the one port open, but we're seeing both of them are pretty darn close to 110 decibels output in a wide open field with the microphone 2 meters away. You put one of these subs into a room that has a floor and walls and ceiling, and he said he's going for corner placement, right? 4 corner placement. So you are gaining at least 9 decibels of output. That's conservatively, you're gaining 9 decibels of output.
I'm going to argue with you.
Okay.
Looking at the next chart, if you go and look at frequency response, he's talking about 16 Hertz. Right?
Well, let's put the 16 Hertz aside for a minute. Let's focus on 20 and above. Yeah.
Okay, I'll agree with you at the 20 and above. You'll get slightly better with both ports.
Okay.
But the question as asked,
if
he wants the extension down to 16 Hertz, I would go with the one port open because you get 1.4 dB more with that approach at 16 Hertz. So with two of those, you're close to 3 dB, which is, a perceptible amount. If you could actually hear 16 Hertz, I know you can't really, but
yeah, I mean, you also got to consider, I mean, you are gaining more distortion when you do that. I mean, I think the reduction in maximum headroom is kind of negligible. I mean, it's measurable, but we're talking like 1.5 dB across the board for that gain of about 1.5 dB at 16 Hertz specifically. But the amount of distortion does go up across the board when you go down to the single port. And of course, the distortion would go up when you plug one of the ports. I mean, what else could possibly happen? So, I mean, honestly, I don't think audibly you're going to hear any difference in either setup scenario.
Yeah, human beings are not that tuned to listening to these lower frequencies. Our little ears are only like this far apart from each other.
That's right.
These are like 50, foot long waves. So at 16 hertz, you're not really going to pick up on it that much. I think that a lot gets made of these numbers and this,
yes.
It's almost like comparing horsepower or something like that, right? They're theoretical numbers to talk about, but whether or not you're ever going to use that, hard to say.
But just purely objectively speaking, given that from 2 meters away in a wide open field, they can comfortably give you 110 dB output, as those burst figures are indicating for most, certainly in the most of the bass that we really care about, like between, 30 and 80 hertz, you can go above 110 dB quite easily for short-term peaks, whether that's one port closed or not. Like I say, you put those in the four corners of your room, you're definitely getting at least 9 dB more output, plus I would say healthily another 3 to 6 more above that by having 4 subs in this room. So we're talking maybe as much as 15 dB more output, conservatively, at least, 120 dB coming out there from 2 meters away. But even with the long length of your room, it's like, getting 115 dB at the seat once you have all 4, objectively, you're going to be doing it with either of these port modes. That's where I land.
These are big subs. You're going to get plenty of his room. Do we know dimensions on it?
It's about 31 feet long, and then it's quite a bit narrower. It's like it was under 14 feet wide. Okay.
He asked the question, for the time being, with just the 2 subs instead of 4, what can he expect in terms of max output and extension in his room? So, the going to the 4 subs is really more about even seat to seat consistency for your bass. I think that the 2 subs in opposite corners will probably do a great job. I don't want you to be underwhelmed, like some of our other listeners, when you make the change to going to 4 subs and it doesn't seem that much louder. The amount of times you're going to push these things to the very ragged edge of their performance capabilities is super slim, right? If you're watching, Tron, or if you're watching Blade Runner or something like that, there are some scenes where you're going to be, literally shaking the house apart, probably with 2 of these. And when you run all 4, even more so.
And he is going to have 2 rows of seats. So there is going to be the benefit there. If all of those rows of seats are filled up, having the 4 subs is going to have a benefit. It's that much easier to get closer to uniform bass across all of the seats in the 2 rows. There is benefit there. But I don't think you got much trouble hitting the full reference volume that you want to. Certainly at the, like I say, the actual like physical kick you in the chest is like that 40 to 60 hertz region, right? And it's like you're not going to have, like, these things can come pretty close to 120 dB, just one of them in a wide open field from 2 meters away. It's like, you're going to be okay with 4 in your enclosed room.
So part 3 of his question, the TN1 sub have an adjustable Q control knob. It goes from a 0.37 to a 0.7. Sue's instructions say that 0.3 settings will output the most mid-bass headroom in all room sizes and result in a flatter deep bass response in small rooms. The 0.7 setting, according to Shu, will result in the flattest deep bass response in large rooms, but it won't have as much additional headroom. So what does the Q knob actually do, and which settings should he use? I want to take a crack at answering this, and I'm going to use my physical hands as a diagram here. Good. So when you're adjusting an equalizer, you can change the frequency, right, up or down on the band that you want to be the center frequency of what you're adjusting. You can then adjust the amplitude, right? The amount of cut or boost that you're putting at whatever frequency you wanted. And then you can vary out how wide from that center point that you're actually adjusting. So a very low Q, 0.3, versus a very high Q, 0.7, is going to change how much of the frequencies on either side of that center frequency you're impacting with this.
Yeah. So the thing to remember here is that if the number is higher, right? 0.7 is a higher numerical value than 0.3. So if the number is higher, then that like shape is more narrow. It's more of a closer to being a single frequency peak if the number is numerically higher. The lower numerical value, 0.3 in this case, is the wider, less steep, it's more of a rolling hill or a speed bump versus a very sharp peak that it'll be at the 0.7. So in this case, what they're talking about is not actually a filter that goes on both sides of the frequency they're talking about. They're talking about a rumble filter, essentially, on this sub. It's a single-ended filter. It is, in fact, a high-pass filter. It's rolling off the low end. So they're saying, okay, when we get down to the low extension, and I believe this one is it 22 hertz that they do in this one? They center this way. It's something like that. It's like just above 20 hertz. They're like, once we get down to that frequency, how steeply does it roll off below that, right? So that's why they're saying if you do it at the 0.7, the steeper one, then it's rolling off very quickly below that point. So they're like, okay, you're in a big room. You need as much output down to that frequency as you can get, but then it rolls off very steeply below that. That means we don't have a whole lot of extra headroom to give you, but it's like it's going to remain flatter objectively in a large room right down to that frequency, and then it's going to roll off steeply. The 0.3, you're in a small room, it's rolling off more gradually, but you're taking advantage of room gain at the same time. So you're like getting that more gradual roll off, but then you're gaining the room gain, and that's sort of compensating for the roll off there. So that's what's going on there. The testing that Audioholics did when they're doing it out in the wide open field for maximum output and in the size of room that you have, they went towards the 0.7. They went towards the steep roll off. They're like, give me everything you can down to the low frequency and then roll it off very quickly and protect the driver. And that's what would make sense for you to do too.
Okay, so part 4. He mentioned having it in mind how he might want to achieve 16 hertz extension. Honestly, he can't actually explain why. He just recalls that for some reason, 16 hertz used to always be the goal that was mentioned. And that was back many years before the current craze over having infrasonic bass. So, do we remember where that 16 hertz figure came from and why people wanted to achieve it so badly? Rob?
I do. Yes.
Great.
Yeah, it was pipe organ. That was always the argument. It was that the fundamental tone on the lowest pedal of a pipe organ has a 16 hertz fundamental. And so everyone was like, well, if you want to be able to play all the instruments in the world, your subs have to dig down to 16 hertz because that's the lowest fundamental on a full-size pipe organ. That's where it all came from. I remember that clearly.
So, Ilango, if you want that, all of that pipe organ music that you have on CD.
Right.
All right. How do we actually feel about targeting either 20 hertz or 16 hertz extension? Well, so, human hearing is considered to be 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, right? Yeah. But that those frequencies change as we age or hearing damage, those kind of things. In theory, you're not hearing below 20 hertz. You can feel pressure changes. At some point, it becomes the weather as opposed to frequencies that you're listening to. Do we actually feel 16 hertz or anything below 20 hertz for that matter or not? I remember when I'm back in my car audio days, getting one of the Kenwood test discs, and you put it in and you could go frequency by frequency. And I think it was from 20 hertz to 100 hertz or something like that. Okay. Each track was a different frequency. And I remember, with my 4 10-inch subs in the back of the car, starting at 20 and going, man, those subs are really moving. And when the windows were open and I'm like, I can't hear anything, but look at them go, So
yeah.
Is it perceptible in a sealed room at 20 hertz? Yeah, probably. At 16 hertz, it's perceptible. It's doing something. Chances are you're going to hear higher harmonic distortions or stuff rattling around in the room or something else like that. But 16 hertz, there aren't a lot of content creators necessarily putting that content onto the 4K Blu-rays.
It's very little.
If you're streaming it, you're probably never going to see that kind of stuff. They're going to cut that off anyways. But your subs are going to be capable of it, so you can play around with it and see how it works. If you notice it, play some of those really, really low stuff. You can get into even with some of the UMIC 1 and the REW, you can try sweeps that'll go down that low and see where you stop hearing it and where you're feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, my genuine opinion on this whole infrasonic bass craze is that I think it's misunderstood. I think there's some misunderstanding that's going on because Tom and I refer back to there's been multiple evidence of this now, right? When they finally detected the way elephants are communicating, and it's in infrasonic sounds, and we make their, like, people are gonna say, hey, that was outside, and like, of course you didn't notice it. It was, outside thing. I'm like, people were standing directly beside the elephants while they were making those below 20 hertz sounds and talking to another elephant that was 3 miles away. So it was bellowing loud enough below 20 hertz to be heard 3 miles away, with people standing right beside it, and they had no idea that any sort of anything vibration was being made. So the argument that, oh, you can feel below 20 hertz in your bones, it's like, nope, I don't buy it. But here's what I do buy. Because, like, I've seen this. You start playing around with infrasonic bass, and it's like something in your room is going to be physically shaking. Very likely the entire room, like the floor, the
structure.
walls. So it's like when people say, I can feel it, I'm like, yeah, you can feel when your entire room is literally vibrating in sympathy with something. So it's like, do you need that to happen? Well, I can understand enjoying it. I like when people say, oh, it was so cool, my subwoofers made the dishes in my kitchen rattle. I'm like, well, to me, that's noise, and I don't want that. But if you think it's super cool, then you're gonna think that the entire room literally vibrating because your sub is playing below 20 hertz is cool. And I understand that, but I think it's a misunderstanding that you, like, need that sound to be played to get the full experience.
I don't know, Rob. If I put one of those elephants in my theater, I bet I could have heard it.
I would not heard it, but yeah, maybe something would have been felt. And yeah, that's a similar thing. The other thing I will say, though, is I've mentioned this before, just like how we can't see infrared light, okay? We cannot see it, but we can see the effect that infrared light has on visible light. That's heat waves, right? We've all seen heat waves. That is infrared light interfering with visible light. We do not see with our human eyes the infrared light directly, but we can see the wave interference pattern that it creates in visible light, and that can happen in sound too. And again, it's from the lower wavelength interfering with the higher wavelength. We don't get the same thing like ultraviolet light we never detect with our human eyes, and we don't detect ultrasonic sound coming down and interfering in the audible frequency range. But we can detect beats. We can detect interference wave patterns from infrasonic bass interacting with audible bass. So the thing is, if that was a recording, then that's going to be in the recording. The beats are going to be in the recording. You don't even have to play the fundamental that's below 20 hertz to have recorded the wave interference that happened. The microphone will pick that up. But if it's all being generated synthetically, that's where people are going to argue, well, you actually need to play that infrasonic fundamental to create the beats that, were they intentional? Were they not? I don't know, because a lot of recording studios aren't actually playing that infrasonic bass, and it's kind of there by mistake. But yeah, that's kind of the argument for it.
Do you think there's something to be said for subwoofers have gotten so good recently, within the last 5-10 years, that in order for them to keep selling subwoofers, they need to introduce something to give you that FOMO, right? So, TV manufacturers came out with 3D, or they went from, standard def to HD to 4K, right? Is this just like the next thing that they can offer?
I think it's the simplest of all things. For a long time, getting to 20 hertz with a subwoofer was really difficult. It was expensive, it was big, it was rare. And so I purely think it's the thinking of, if getting to 20 hertz was good, if that was the goal, then getting to 16 hertz must be better, and getting to 10 hertz after that must be better, and getting to single digit bass must be better than that, because it was so hard for so long to get to 20. So I'm like, that's all it is. It's just carrying on. It's the same argument that if from 1080p to 4K was good, then going to 8K must be better. But we've seen how the market is like, nah, we don't really need 8K. Like, not the majority of the time. We don't need 8K. The argument for 16K has pretty much disappeared at this point, right? So yeah, I think there's some of that there. But yeah, mostly, I think it's that people have gone into a infrasonic bass demo, the actual physical room or their seat or the riser that the seat is on, that has been vibrating in sympathy. That's what they felt. They felt that. I'm not doubting that. I felt that, but they've attributed it to, well, if I can feel that vibration, that means I can feel infrasonic bass. And it's like, you can feel the entire room vibrating. That's what you can feel. If you want that, yeah, go for it.
All right, so part 5 of Ilango's longest question ever. His understanding is that right now, Dirac Live Art does not do the whole active room treatment thing any lower than 20 hertz. He saw a video with Josh Walker from Dirac saying they are always working on updates, but he didn't confirm whether art correction below 20 hertz would be happening or not. They're aware some people want it, though. Do we have any thoughts on that, Rob?
I mean, look, I'm in agreement with Drac. I don't personally worry too much about it. Also, it gets harder and harder and harder to. I mean, first of all, gets kind of rare to have full-on standing waves at like ultra long wavelengths, because now we're not even talking about it went to one wall and doubled back on itself. It had to like go to one wall, go back to the other wall, and double back a third time before we're actually getting doubling up. So it gets harder and harder and harder at like ultra long wavelengths in typical room sizes. But yeah, like correcting that starts getting like nigh impossible. You can't change the phase enough to line it up. You'd have to have like an outright audible delay.
Plus, how many people out there have a subwoofer that can go that low, let alone multiple speakers in their system that can then counteract that kind of thing in the room? So yeah, I can see why Dirac's not making that a priority.
But I wanted to ask you, Joe, because I mean, do you have experience with art yet? I'd love to rely on you when it comes to that.
Not yet. I'm waiting for you or I to purchase this, because I do have my Marantz AV10 over there. Yeah. So one of my resolutions for the year was to get more into Dirac. I plan to buy the full suite, and I need to spend some time watching some videos on doing, because I've not done a Dirac setup. I've always
we both have
Odyssey.
Equipment capable of it, but don't have the first hand yet to say. All right.
Okay, so we'll have a handshake agreement that we'll figure this out together.
Yeah,
So part F, Ilango has attempted to order a calibrated U-mic from Cross Spectrum Labs, but they've got a message up there out of stock and not sure when they'll have more given current price instability. Mm-hmm. He could still order a U-mic 1 from miniDSP, and they say that the calibration file they include from the factory really is unique to each and every U-mic 1. It's not a batch process. Mm-hmm. So is that good enough? Is it truly vital to wait for Cross Spectrum Labs version? If what he mainly wants to do is take some measurements in RU and be able to compare the graphs over time as he makes changes to his home theater setup, I'll confess right now, I did not buy my U-mic 1 from Cross Spectrum. I bought it from miniDSP. It's worked very reliably with no problems. And especially if you're using the same mic and the same measuring method, it doesn't need to be Cross Spectrum's lab calibrated to get comparable results.
Correct.
So I don't think there's any problem with saving a couple of bucks and buying what's available now.
You are absolutely fine to go ahead and make that purchase. And you know what? Herb at Cross Spectrum would tell you the same thing. He's not the sort of person who's like, you must wait for us to have them back. He'll be like, yeah, no, dude, go ahead and buy the mic. It'll be totally fine. Yeah, Cross Spectrum, I think, adds value for a very minimal overhead charge. It is more granular measurement and calibration that they do than the factory one, and they give you more angles that you can use if you want to. But honestly, it's totally fine to buy from miniDSP. You have my blessing. I am certain Herb would give you his blessing as well, given the circumstances right now. So feel free, make that buy.
I'll follow that up with an agreement. Part G, speculation time. Woohoo! As mentioned, his basement home theater room is enclosed. It is much longer than it is wide, and while it's mostly a rectangle, it does have a section at the back of the room where there's the staircase going up. The door that makes this room enclosed is at the top of the staircase, not the bottom. He has always planned to include acoustic treatments, and they'll be 4 inches thick minimum. Mm-hmm. He is also on board with having thick corner bass traps, but aesthetically and practically speaking, due to windows and the staircase at the back, he can't actually put massive floor-to-ceiling corner bass traps in all 4 corners. So what if he uses Dirac Live Art? Mm-hmm. He's seen the claims that even in a rectangular enclosed room, art can still be superior to passive bass traps. So, do we think adding Dirac Art to his system will be beneficial no matter what? And if he has art, does he still need the corner bass traps at all? And would having just 2 corner bass traps be worth it in any way, Dirac Art or not? So, my thoughts on this with the 4 subwoofers and the adaptive room technology, that you can get away with just doing the 2 corners. I don't see any problem with that. You don't have a choice really anyways because of the room itself.
Yeah.
I think this technology will continue to mature. They'll continue to introduce updates to it and upgrades that will give it more functionality. Mm-hmm. But I think that it is a really strong tool for low frequency correction using all of those drivers that you have. Since you've got 4 identical subwoofers in a mostly rectangular room, it's going to be pretty predictable. If you're putting your subs all in the corners, as one of them fires, the other one can fire out of phase, so that it'll do the job of the same thing that the bass trap, which would be collect or counteract that pressure wave.
Yeah, I mean, my prediction would be that if you do an optimized 4-corner subwoofer setup, that for the actual frequencies where it's really just the subwoofers playing, I mean, I wouldn't predict that Dirac Art is going to make like some tremendous difference in that scenario, right? Because I mean, we know you can objectively like look at all the measurements we've had for a decade or more at this point of 4 subwoofers all in the corners in a, you know, pretty darn close to enclosed rectangular room. It's like, there's not a ton of improvement to be had there if that's optimally set up to begin with. But where Art makes all the sense in the world is in the crossover region, right? I mean, the base control already attempted to do that, but Art is even more sophisticated in that crossover region. And given that you're going to have a 2 rows type of setup, given that you might want to, in your case, aesthetically speaking, err on the side of a little bit less in the way of acoustic treatment versus more, it's like, I'm not going to say that I wouldn't predict any benefit whatsoever. And given the price that you would spend on the amount of bass trapping to equal what Art should be capable of electronically, I'm like, the price might actually be in the favor of Art, honestly, just dollar for dollar. It might work out to be in its favor. Passive bass traps basically are never a detriment. Like as far as the bass is concerned and the crossover region is concerned, you could fill the entire room with insulation and it wouldn't be a detriment. It would be a problem for other parts of the system, but not for the bass itself. So, putting in whatever bass traps you can is like never a negative thing. But I think the argument can be made here that Art in that crossover region specifically could be beneficial to you and can make sense dollar-wise because of the amount you'd have to spend on passive treatments anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Part H. So what happens if you use Dirac Live Room Correction or any other room correction program for that matter while having 2 pairs of side surround speakers, 1 pair for each row of seating? Are you still supposed to keep all of your microphone measurements positions within a fairly small radius of mic position 1, or should you be taking measurements in both rows of seats? Let's go back and answer the first part. The microphone does not know how many speakers, how many tweeters, how many mid-ranges, how many or whatever is playing. All it knows is what it's getting, right? Yep. So 2 pairs of side speakers physically are going to sound like 1 speaker, 1 channel, 1 signal to the microphone. So that's
whatever sound arrives at the mic. Yeah, it has no concern about what generated the sound. It just,
right. So if a car drives by at the same time, it thinks that car is part of that speaker too. So yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
About the positioning with the microphone measurements, yeah, you do want to keep them within that fairly small radius of mic position 1 because you're trying to spatially average around that primary listening position, right? So if you were to go much wider than that, you're going to get a little bit more unpredictable results. So keep it within, a seat width or so of your main listening position.
Yeah, I mean, really all that happens as you start taking measurements farther and farther away from position number 1 is that the EQ will actually do less because what it's going to be detecting is that I'm having significant changes between microphone positions. And if I make one seat better or one of those positions better, I'm going to end up making another one of them worse. And so it ends up doing next to nothing. So if you want the equalization to be the most noticeable, then you actually want to keep that cluster pretty darn tight.
Next part, how does the room correction treat those 2 pairs of surround speakers? Does it just apply EQ exactly the same as if you only had a single pair of surrounds? We kind of already talked about that. Yes, that's what it does.
That is the case.
And if he does get Dirac Live Art, will that make any special use of the 2 pairs of surrounds, like use them individually somehow, even though they're just wired together in series? Nope. It's going to treat it as a single one.
The only thing that could is something that's capable of the completely separate surround 1, surround, and surround 2 setup that the full home version of Dolby Atmos is capable of doing, where those are individually adjustable speakers, but you pretty much need a Storm Audio or a Trinov to do that, because those are the only ones that are going beyond 1.6 type of thing. So no, it's going to treat them as a single speaker.
All right, you want to read number 5?
Yeah. But this is Mohsen in Australia. Mohsen previously asked about external hard drive options to store his disk backups. He wanted a minimum of 20 terabytes. So I said the only thing that honestly makes sense, given the budget he was working with, was to go for a regular old spinning hard drive with a USB connection, and that you honestly don't have much in the way of options. It's going to be a 7200 RPM drive, almost certainly 512 megabytes of cache. That's kind of the only thing that's on the market, regardless of the brand. So practically speaking, at that sort of capacity, there just aren't hard drives with different specifications to even worry about. And especially when all you want to do is store and play back disk backups. So he hopped on Amazon Australia. He ordered a Seagate external USB hard drive. He went for the largest capacity available, which was 28 terabytes. At the time that he sent his email, he hadn't opened the package yet, and he wasn't totally sure if he'd done the right thing. Should he return it? Should he be worried about any of the negative reviews he might be able to find online? No, you did fine.
You're
Open
good.
it up and... In fact, open it up and test it as soon as you can, because if there is a problem with the hard drive, you're going to detect it early. Like if it just doesn't spin up, which can happen. You can get a bum unit that just doesn't spin up if it really has trouble. If you're hearing ticking sounds, like you'll hear physical mechanical noises if it's like screeching, which can happen. A platter can be misaligned. Things like that can happen. You want to detect that early because Amazon is a great place to buy it. They will absolutely give you the exchange, and it really won't be much trouble with them. So open it up, try it out. If there's going to be a problem, you'll detect it early. That's the best thing to do. And there's nowhere. Look, any hard drive you buy, I've bought hard drives from all kinds of different brands. I've had one or two that have failed here or there. I've had some that have been in service for years and years and years and years, even from the brands that people are like, oh, they make crappy hard drives. I'm like, no, you got a bum unit. It happens from every brand.
I had experience almost back to back with hard drive failures. One in TiVo, one in my Kaleidoscape, and you know, in both cases, swapped them out, put the new ones back in. Things returned back to normal.
And the Kaleidoscapes are like, you know, enterprise grade hard drives. It can happen to anything.
It happens. Yeah, those are the purples, I think, are the really nice ones. But yeah, number 6 question, Rohan. We might recall that Rohan replaced his problematic Marantz SR6015 receiver with an Onkyo TX-RZ30, in large part thanks to our advice. He is 99% happy with it, and in his reflective room that does not have any acoustic treatments, he has become a fan of Dirac live room correction over the past 2 months that he's had the RZ30. He has encountered one issue. The RZ30 will play back AAC files that are stereo 2-channel perfectly fine, but if he feeds it a 5.1 channel AAC file from his NVIDIA Shield Pro, the Onkyo produces noise. People online all seem to say it's an HDMI connection issue, but he hasn't found any solution. He's also had 2 physical discs, the 4th element.
Oh,
that should be the 5th element.
That was a typo. That should be a fifth. That was literally a typo.
That was the prequel to the 5th element. Sorry. The 5th element on Ultra HD Blu-ray and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington on 1080p Blu-ray that resulted in noise coming out of his speakers when they very first began to play. But when the actual movie is played, the noise is gone and it doesn't come back. So, is there a fix? Can we get him to begin to being 100% happy with the RZ30 by eliminating that last bit of noise? So at the startup of these 2 discs, out of all of this you've tried, you get a little bit of type noise, I'm guessing. Yep. And that sounds like an HDMI, either potentially a connection or handshake kind of noise being introduced back and forth, maybe? I don't know exactly
or
what's
possibly a decoder error. I had a Yamaha back in the day that would once in a while have a decoder error, and until it relocked onto the signal, like which literally meant pausing whatever I was doing and then playing it again, and the decoding locked back in. So something along those lines.
I don't know how you're going to fix this. I
don't know that I have a fix for 2 anomaly discs. I pretty much chalk that up to anomaly. Now, the 5.1 AAC, like I get wanting to play back exactly what the original file was, but the NVIDIA Shield can absolutely transcode the 5.1 AAC on the fly to 5.1 PCM, and you have no problems playing that back. Like if 5.1 AAC specifically is something that the Onkyo should be able to decode, but it's having some trouble and giving you some noise, I'm like, you can change that in the only source device you have that outputs 5.1 AAC, and you can get the NVIDIA Shield to transcode that to 5.1 PCM on the fly and output it that way. That's my solution to it. I don't think the solution is in the Onkyo. I think the solution is in the source device.
And I'm just curious, kind of as a follow-up, is there a volume adjustment, any other issue that, you know, is this noise louder or quieter, or is it always a set volume, which I'm guessing it probably is, because it's probably some other kind of weird noise that's being introduced. It's not...
Yeah.
in the receiver, I don't think. And so no, I don't have any great suggestions.
Honestly, I'm not even blaming the receiver on this one. Like, it's probably the interaction between a specific file format, specifically how the source device is outputting it at the given time, and the way the Onkyo locks on and decodes that signal. But I don't think there's anything to be done in the Onkyo itself.
So I've got 100% fix for him. Don't watch those two movies, right? Sorry.
Or just know that there could be some noise until the movie actually plays. Like, what do we care? Do we care about the FBI warning having some fluttering noise, or do we care about the movie and if that sounds okay? And if the movie sounds okay, I think it's an anomaly we can just ignore, to be honest.
All right.
Infinite Gary. Do you want to read Infinite Gary? You're the guest. You've got to read the Infinite
All
Gary.
Right? I appreciate that. So, from Infinite Gary, Marantz recently expanded their AV separates lineup with the introduction of the new AV30 and AMP30 models. There's no big reinvention here. Marantz's current AVS separates lineup started with the 15.4 channel AV10 Pre-Pro and the 16 channel Class D AMP10, both priced at $8,000 each. Although you can bundle them together and save $1,000. That's funny. When I got mine, they were a lower price than that.
They were, yeah, but that's the current price.
True. A while later came the 13.4 channel AV20 Pre-Pro and also the AMP20. But the AMP20 only has 12 channels of Class D amplification built in. So if you maxed out the AV20 speaker count, you'd need at least one more channel of amplification than the AMP20 could provide. Both were priced at $6,000 each. Also with a bundle that would save you $1,000 when bought together. So now there's the new AV30 and AMP30. We're down to an 11.4 channel Pre-Pro now with identical features to the Marantz Cinema 40 receiver, except with XLR pre-outs and no amplification built in, of course. But the AMP30 is only a 6-channel Class D amplifier. The AV30 and AMP30 are both priced at $4,000 each. No bundle deal listed right now, although interestingly, Marantz does have bundles of the AMP30 paired with their Cinema 50 or Cinema 60 receivers. But Gary was just a bit puzzled. Why a 6-channel amplifier? That just seems like kind of an inconvenient number, and being priced at $4,000 also seems just a little bit strange. $6,000 can get you 12 channels with the AMP20, and $8,000 could either get you 2 of the AMP30s, which would also be 12 channels, or it could get you 16 channels with the AMP10. So why 6? And do we think that might be a bit of a poor choice on their part? Rob?
So, the first part is we're seeing all even numbers, including the 16 channels on the AMP10 when the maximum speaker count on the AV10 is 15 speakers, because these are Class D modules that only come in stereo modules. So they're like, well, we could artificially turn one of them off, I suppose, and get to the odd number for the center speaker, but they're just giving you the stereo pairs. It's, as far as I can tell, the same module inside all of these. So a significant amount of the price is the power supply, the chassis, the rest of the internal. So that's why it doesn't scale down exactly linearly with channel count as you're coming down in the price. But honestly, it's because mainly they're marketing the new AMP30 as a 3-channel amplifier. They're like, yeah, bi-amp your front 3 speakers with this, or bridge it, because it can be bridged. And they're kind of marketing it more as a 3-channel amp than a 6-channel amp. They're like, yeah, use this for your front 3 speakers with gobs of power available.
Well, and I think you could do, 6 overheads with it. You could do a 5.1 system, and then, bridge to your center channel or something. There's a lot of things you could do, but this is like buying shoes. Nobody just sells you a left shoe, right? You're always buying them in pairs. That's the way they make them. And you got to remember, Marantz is going to do manufacturing at a scale that they're going to build as much off of one part as possible, so that they're not trying to, come up with this unique single module.
But they're like, hey, get an AV10 for the Pre-Pro, 15 speakers, get an AMP20, right? That's 12 channels of amplification, then get an AMP30 and bi-amp or bridge the front 3 speakers. They're like, that's the solution.
I like it. Okay. Part B of Gary's question. Gary reached out to SVS and they confirmed that their new Revolution soundbar will only work with 1 or 2 of their own new wireless subwoofer model. SVS explained that they are viewing the Revolution soundbar as being a lifestyle product aimed at customers who want minimal complexity. So they have optimized bass management ahead of time, and the Revolution soundbar and its wireless sub or subs are prepared, meaning paired in advance. and meant to work together straight away. So there is no subwoofer pre-out and no option to pair the Revolution soundbar with some other wireless sub. Gary can understand their reasoning, but he was still a bit surprised that SVS is not including a subwoofer pre-out. What if you want a bigger sub? Or what if they already had an SVS subwoofer in their house and you just want to add it to the SVS Revolution soundbar, perhaps for a second version? I agree with you. I think it would have made more sense to have an output and not necessarily come up with. I know that they make their tri-band wireless transmitter and receiver, but I agree with you. I think it does make a lot of sense. But they're trying, I think, to hit a certain product type, of that lifestyle, type of a customer, that this is for a bedroom or it's for a living room where they're not going to expand the system much. Most customers, 2 subwoofers probably would be enough for them. But I agree with you. I always want more than what the manufacturer is going to provide. So a wired option would have been great to use. Or even, off the wireless one, can I add another wired sub? I see where you're coming from and agree with you that, maybe they'll make that change as a running change in the future.
Yeah, I can see both sides on this, honestly. But I'll be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that SVS of all companies wouldn't include a subwoofer pre-out, because I'm like, surely they know that there are people who already own SVS subs, right? Like their previous models, and might be thinking, hey, I'd like to take the SVS sub I already own and attach it to the brand new SVS Revolution soundbar. So that one does surprise me a little bit. I'm completely speculating here, but I wonder if there was a little bit of thought to SVS. We laud their customer service. And they're like, we could be reaching a whole new type of customer with this soundbar product, with some, a group of customers that we haven't gone to before. It's like, do we want to be fielding all the questions about how do I pair this soundbar with whatever given subwoofer from whatever given company? They're like, if we just limit it so that it works with 1 or 2 of our pre-paired wireless subs, and it's like, that's done, and we don't have to field all of the customer service questions about how to make it work with anything out there under the sun. I kind of doubt that to some extent, because SVS is like, yeah, by all means, call us. We'll talk about anything with you. But I just, maybe in the back of my mind, I'm like, I would think of that. I'd be like, I don't know if I want to field all those calls. Maybe we just simplify this for ourselves.
But I think that if this is an entry-level product for somebody, one of the things I've always liked is, what can I buy now that I can use for this use case, but then change it to another use case down the road in the future, right?
Of course.
So you are a little bit limited with the flexibility of that by having this pre-paired subwoofer that probably wouldn't pair with anything else.
That's right. Yeah. No, I see both sides, but I can see the argument either direction. So we're pretty darn close to 2 hours. I don't know how much time you have. We can go to your question. My personal love would be if we could do 2 more off of this list, which are pretty lengthy, but whatever you want to do, Joe.
I want to talk about Andy, because he got his wife to change out a TV without it breaking. So I want to know how that happened. So please, let's start there.
I'll go ahead and read Andy's question. So Andy's wife agreed to let him replace their 55-inch Panasonic Plasma from 2012 with a brand new OLED. Agreeing to the TV upgrade was her Christmas present to him this year.
So there you go. That's the answer. She said yes. Right. Merry Christmas.
That's right. So he was listening to us when Tom was deciding on his new TV to buy. So Andy figured he'd get the same one, a Samsung S90D QD OLED. But they, after
the last episode, I don't know if that was a good call. Go ahead.
That's a bit of an anomaly, honestly. So anyway, Andy and his wife, they tend to do a lot of their shopping at Costco, and Costco only had the newest S90F model from 2025 available. So he went for that instead. His is still working. Sorry to Tom. And he's very happy with how it looks. It can get very bright. Coming from a plasma, you're going to notice the difference going to a Samsung QD OLED. So he's also part of an AV Facebook group, and they've criticized getting a Samsung QD OLED instead of an LG OLED because the Samsung does not have Dolby Vision. He recalls Tom also considered the lack of Dolby Vision a little bit in his decision, but could we remind Andy, why is not having Dolby Vision okay in this case? Is it just that the S90F is already bright enough that it doesn't really need Dolby Vision?
Yeah, so let me try and tackle this. So, with HDR, you had HDR10, right? Static metadata. Yep. This movie fits between this range and this range.
And I mean, it honestly has the data of like, this is the single brightest pixel in this whole movie. You, the TV manufacturer, can choose how you want to deal with that single brightest pixel. You could clip it off, you could roll it off, you could make sure that you have enough headroom to display it. So you decide how you want to handle it, but then everything below that brightest pixel, it's going to have to get tone mapped in some way to the remaining range of brightness that this TV has available, and that is going to be the same tone map applied across this entire movie. That's how HDR10 is going to work.
Right. So if you take a movie that, let's say like the Meg or something that goes to like 4,000 nits in their mastering, you need to now master the entire movie with HDR10 to be set for those parameters that you'll maybe touch a couple of times. HDR10 Plus adds dynamic metadata. So it can go kind of, I don't know if it's scene by scene or frame by frame, but give you different metadata as the movie progresses that you're watching. Right. Dolby Vision, I believe, is frame by frame, right? That it can dynamically
It depends on somewhat on what the mastering engineers actually want to do on that front.
Right.
Including both of them have the ability to use some amount of an automated process to do that. But yeah, the idea is that when you get to that scene that has the single brightest pixel in the entire movie, I mean, again, it's an option. There aren't actually like fixed rules for exactly how the manufacturer tone maps that. But what they could decide, we get to the scene that has the single brightest pixel. For that one scene, we're going to retain all of the detail that we possibly can. So a lot of the rest of the image gets dimmed down to retain enough headroom to show you that brightest pixel as being brighter than everything else on the screen, not like chopping it off or letting it turn to pure white. But then for other scenes that are overall darker and don't contain that single brightest pixel, we don't have to darken everything anymore. We can brighten the entire image back up more and just have enough range to show you all the detail.
Yeah, so and that's what tone mapping really is, right? So if the movie went from 0 to 4,000, but your TV can only go 0 to 800, it's how do we want to alter the picture to fit within the range that the TV can display. Yeah. But as TVs are able to get brighter and brighter, and that they can actually hit maybe that 4,000 without having to do any mapping, well, then Dolby Vision loses its importance to some extent.
It honestly does. Yeah. Once you get to the TVs that can just show the signal nit for nit, bit for bit, what it asked for, you don't need to do any tone mapping at all. So yeah, look, the S90F, it can legitimately hit about 1250, 1300 nits, not for a long duration. It can't like light up the entire screen 1300 nit white, for minutes at a time. It can't even do the entire screen that bright, but like we're talking about little specular highlights and they typically don't last that long, and it can genuinely do like 1250, 1300 nits, that S90F. The majority of HDR content out there, including Dolby Vision content, really doesn't have a ton of information above 1,000 nits. In fact, people have been pointing out how a lot of movies are like, how come this movie that like technically has a 4,000 nit Dolby Vision master, like we measured it and the brightest thing this movie ever does is 400 nits. They're like, what was even the point of that? So in that sense, it's like just the vast majority of content, it rarely is going above 1,000 nits. If it does, Samsung has a pretty middle of the road approach to tone mapping, which is they will clip off something that's like above 3,000 nits. It's just like, I'm sorry, there's not going to be a difference between 3,000 nits and 4,000 nits on this OLED TV. That bit of detail is just lost. It's just pure white up there. But it's like they do a pretty middle of the road where they do a pretty good job of retaining most detail, but not at the expense of over darkening the image. Samsung likes an overall fairly bright image, so they'll err on the side of clipping a little bit of the absolute brightest detail. So like that's the argument that's being made. Dolby Vision is not even a guarantee. Right? We've seen some TVs where they go into Dolby Vision mode and they actually look worse than they do in HDR10 mode because some of the decisions that were made on how do we treat it when we get this metadata. And some of them, like with Dolby Vision, if it goes above the capabilities of this TV and we have the metadata that says so, we just clip everything. You just get a bright white screen and no detail at all. It's like, well, technically it's decoding Dolby Vision, but it's doing it in a really crappy way. So yeah, in that sense, I think you're rarely needing anything beyond the capabilities built into the TV. And then for the few times that it does a very reasonable job of tone mapping anyway, without the Dolby Vision metadata.
But Andy, can I have your wife talk to my wife? Because I still have a 60-inch Panasonic Plasma from about 2012 in the family room, and it's still kicking. No, we actually really like that TV. It's one of the few TVs that speakers sound good on.
It's kind of nice to be able to go back and remind yourself too. So he had a second part to his question. Andy has a Denon X3700H receiver, but he has only ever used 5.1 speakers as his setup. Until now, he's always chosen straight ahead decoding as his preferred way to listen. If the original source is 2-channel stereo, he'll listen in stereo mode. If the source is 5.1 Dolby Digital, he listens in 5.1 Dolby Digital listening mode. But he's heard me extolling the virtues of Dolby Atmos height virtualization, and it's made him want to give it a try. Doesn't cost anything, so why not give it a try? But with his X3700H set up for using only 5 speakers, how does he activate the Dolby Atmos height virtualization? With his new QD OLED in place, he does already subscribe to the highest tiers of most of the streaming services. He was always setting the listening mode to straight ahead Dolby Digital Plus decoding, because that's what's coming from the streaming services. But which listening mode should he use now if he wants to try out Dolby Atmos height virtualization? He's seeing options for Dolby Digital Plus, Dolby Digital Plus with Dolby Surround, Dolby Digital Plus with DTS Neural X, and also just a Dolby Atmos /D surround setting. Is there anything else special that he needs to do? Do all of those apply virtual height speaker up mixing? And then what are some good movies to test out to that effect? Yeah, we can go through some of those. What do we say, Joe?
So as far as the movies go, I see your notes here. Top Gun Maverick, great movie. Gravity has a ton of overhead stuff, especially if you can get the Diamond Lux edition.
And it's actual voices and dialogue, so you'll really, like, your ears are very good at picking up if there's timbral mismatches when it's voices and actual dialogue going into those overhead channels.
Blade Runner 2049, we talked about earlier tonight, but that great movie as far as a lot of effects and surround and deep bass. Dune is a good one. I would throw in there A Quiet Place, especially when you have the monsters walking overhead.
That was one he actually mentioned himself. He looked it up, and so that was there. Ready Player One is another one he heard about, and I totally agree. Master and Commander, I'm not totally sure, because I don't think that ever had an Atmos mix, did it?
I think the new 4K may have it, but that was one that was extremely well recorded. Same kind of thing where you hear them walking above ship when you're down below, or you hear seagulls overhead, things like that. That was a very strong one.
I think those would be some good examples. We also know Pluribus. Pluribus has some great planes flying overhead. So if you want to check out a TV show series on Apple TV Plus that makes use of Atmos overhead sounds, Pluribus has that in second episode is a really good example, plane flying directly overhead. But yeah, what you want to do here, so if the streaming source is sending Atmos, you'll have that option to choose Atmos as the listening mode, even though you only have 5 speakers set up with up to 11 channel processing built into that X3700H, you'll still be able to choose Atmos, even though you physically only have 5 speakers, and that will automatically apply height virtualization, Dolby Atmos height virtualization. So there's nothing else you need to do, no other settings you need to toggle. Similarly, if you choose Dolby Surround, like whatever's going on, if you choose Dolby Surround, it'll use the Dolby Atmos height virtualization automatically to, trick your ears into thinking there's sounds coming from overhead. If you choose the Neural X option, that is going to use DTS's version of the same thing. They call it Virtual X. And there's not really anything else you have to do. Yeah, you activate Neural X, and it's going to use Virtual X because you've already told your AV receiver, I physically have 5 speakers, but go ahead and apply the upmixing. So yeah, quite simple.
One other I'll throw out there, Spider-Man Far From Home. The scene where Spider-Man's being manipulated by the bad guy, Mysterio, thank you. The bad guy's voice is up and moving around in that top layer of speakers, and that's a good one to test that out with.
Agreed. All right, what do we want to do? Do you want to do one more and then yours, or jump to yours? What do you think?
Let's try and dig into David's, and then we can talk a little bit more. So, David. One of David's displays is an LG B8 OLED. Looking back on the reviews and recommended picture settings for the B8 leads to a bit of confusion now because LG has issued firmware updates since then, and some of the setting options have changed. First up, is the Technicolor Expert Picture mode worth exploring? Thoughts?
I don't see any particular reason that you need it. There's other ones I'm going to mention that I would use ahead of that.
His question continues, if not, which picture mode should he be using?
Right, so we're going back to a B8, so that is before they started including the filmmaker mode, because that's pretty much the easy answer these days, but you don't have that. So there is the ISF dark, or it might say dark room, or it might say night. I forget exactly how they labeled it, but there's going to be something that insinuates that you're going into a darker setting, because there's an ISF dark and an ISF bright, or like I say, it might say ISF night and ISF day or something to that effect. But the ISF dark night is going to be the most accurate to the industry standards. I personally make use of both, because I do watch in two different environments. If I'm on my living room TV and it's in the daytime, I have like blinds over my windows, but they don't block out all the ambient light. And if I use the ISF dark mode in there, because the gamma is set, to a shallower rise from dark, it's like I start losing some shadow detail. My pupils have closed down because of the ambient light, and I just can't see some of the details. So I switch over to the ISF day mode, exactly as the name would imply is the use case. So I'd stick to the ISF modes, and honestly, there's not much you have to do to them. Turn off the power saving, because that's going to do some funky things to pumping the brightness on your TV if you don't turn off the power saving. But you turn off the power saving and then use either of the ISF picture modes.
So his question continues, wasn't there something about not setting the OLED light setting too high in order to avoid brightness level shifts?
Yeah, so it's right around, 45 is very safe. You'll almost never see it. Technically speaking, it was 40 on the OLED light setting, where you wouldn't get the automatic brightness limiter activating very much at all. That's purely for standard dynamic range. For the high dynamic range, you leave those settings at default, which I believe is 100 automatically for the OLED light setting when you go to HDR or Dolby Vision. But for the SDR OLED light settings, if you want to avoid it, then basically 45 is about as high as you can go before you'll start noticing that it's applying a brightness limiter.
And he asks because he's noticing while watching The Bad Batch on Disney Plus that it was nearly impossible to see what was going on. It seemed crazy to him that an animated Star Wars show would intentionally look so dark and indiscernible. But if he paused the show, brought up the TV's menu, and then resumed, the image was considerably brighter, although it would darken back down again after some time. Mm-hmm. So what settings should be used to avoid stuff like that?
So unfortunately, so first of all, try those first two things. If you haven't double checked, because the power saving setting is not in the picture menu, I believe it's in the general menu. So make sure the power saving is turned off, because that could be part of the problem. If your OLED light setting is way up, if it's 80, 90, something like that, which look, a lot of the default picture modes, including the ISF day mode, are up at that level. So that could be part of it. You manually lower that down to 45. It'll get rid of the regular automatic brightness limiter. But precisely what you mentioned, the whole thing of if you bring up the TV's menu and the image brightens back up, but over time it dims back down again and then stays really dark, that is unfortunately a thing that can only be changed in the service menu. So I'm not going to go into all the details right here, both for time and also because I don't want to give out too much information about going to service menus where you can actually do permanent damage to the TV if you're not very careful. But if you look up, how do I access an LGB8 service menu, the information is easily available through a search of that. It does typically involve buying a little $10 remote, because the remote that came with your TV can't access the service menu, but you can buy an LG remote for about $10 off of Amazon that'll let you into the service menu. And then there's a thing called GSR, Global Sticky Reduction, if you can believe it, is what that actually stands for. But that is like they were trying to make sure there was no burn in, but unfortunately it does a weird thing where it's like, if it detects a bright thing, it lowers the overall image brightness entirely and then doesn't bring it back up the way it should when the overall image is dark again. But when you brighten things back up, then it resets that. So yeah, that's a bit of a problem that can only be done in the service menu. But if you search for it, you can find the solution. Yeah,
I think the code was up, down, left, right, A, B, if I remember.
If only it were the Konami code.
Part B, there is a game picture mode, but he's aware that on an LG B8, it isn't the same as the super low latency gaming modes found on newer TVs. Vincentio did say in his B8 review that putting the B8 into game mode could lower the lag down to just 21 milliseconds, though. So when he's playing his PS5, should he actually be using the game picture mode?
Yeah, I'm not sure where you heard that it's not the same as the low latency mode on other TVs. Maybe it's because when you're setting the white balance, for some reason, they choose to show that scale as like different labeling in the game picture mode versus all of the other picture modes. I have no idea why they did that, but you still just want to make it as red as it goes because that's the appropriate setting. But yeah, the game mode is like it is a low latency mode. There's no problem using the game picture mode. It is possible to make it every bit as accurate as the other picture modes on that TV. So follow Vincent Tio's advice, follow his settings because he did those for the B8 specifically for gaming purposes, but it mostly just involves making the white point as red as it can possibly be.
Okay. Part C, his main source with this TV is an Apple TV 4K. He followed our recommended settings such as not having Dolby Vision enabled by default and setting the chroma to 420. That all seems to be working well. But he also turned on the match dynamic range and match frame rate features. That's fine for most movies and shows, but it's a problem for YouTube. Sometimes if he goes to play a YouTube short, nearly the whole thing has played before the black screen goes away. Yeah. So does he need to change something? Will doing so ruin his TV and movie watching experience? I've had this exact problem on my JVC projector when I was watching YouTube. I had to turn off, I think it was the match frame rate, if I remember.
I would imagine it's the frame rate because there's not that much HDR on YouTube. I mean, there is some, but it's not nearly as frequent as the frame rate changing. Because, I mean, we do get a lot of content from other countries. So 50 frames, 25 frames is not unusual. And then 24, 30, 60, you can even do 120 on YouTube. So frame rate changing is quite common, especially because so many people are, recording on their phones.
And you're watching YouTube, so it's not that great anyways. But, you can turn that match frame rate on and off pretty easily within the Apple TV. Since most of what I watch critically is not on the Apple TV except some streaming shows that there's no other way to get, I turned it off and left it off because you're right. When I was watching YouTube, I would get, with sometimes 10, 20, 15 seconds of black before I would start seeing a picture again, and the audio would be running the whole time. So, and that was just the resyncing or the rehandshaking or whatever needed to happen between the pieces of gear.
And I gotta say, even for 24 frames per second movies and TV shows, turning the match frame rate off and just leaving the Apple TV 4K outputting 60 frames per second at all times to your LG B8, not that big of a problem because the LG B8 actually does a very good job of detecting when it's receiving a 60 hertz signal, but it can detect that it was originally 24 frames that has been 3.2 pull down and telesynned to fit into the 60 frames per second. It does a very good job of doing the reverse 3.2 pull down and the inverse telesync to bring it back to a steady frame rate free of jutters. So leaving the Apple TV 4K at 60 frames per second at all times, really not that bad. And if it saves you the convenience and the headache of the interstitial black screens, I got no problem doing it that way.
Okay, so part D, prior to RAM and GPU prices going insane, blame Bitcoin, he built himself a pretty nice gaming PC rig. He's got 32 gigabytes of RAM along with an AMD 7900 GRE graphics card and an AMD Ryzen 9 5900X CPU. So for a game like, say, Cyberpunk 2077, he can run it at higher settings on his gaming PC than what the PS5 can muster. But he's got his PC set up in his office with no real desire to ever lug it into this home theater. And he's got a PS5 in his home theater with his nice big HDR TV and his full surround sound setup, plus the comfy couch and his subwoofers. So what is our philosophy in a situation like this? The PC gaming crowd is horrified at the notion of subjecting oneself to lesser graphics. But the PS5 crowd says the games still look great and they'd rather play on a big TV with awesome audio. It could be argued that this ought to be a reason to spend oodles of money upgrading his PC monitor and his office audio system, but if we're just comparing things as they are today in his house, should he be buying graphic-intensive games strictly for his PC, or should he consider the experience as a whole and maybe buy those same games for his PS5 instead? Rob?
So, I mean, if it's me, first of all, you got to understand, I'm buying most games for my Switch 2 these days. So, like, convenience is 100% winning out for me on a personal level. There's no question in my mind that in your exact scenario, I'd be buying those games for the PS5. Like, the audio is such a part of the experience to me. I also want the comfier seat. I don't want to be sitting in my office chair the entire time while I'm gaming. So, to me, there's no question. And look, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Sometimes I'm looking at the digital foundry foundry like still images and slow motion footage, and they're talking about exactly the graphical differences, and I still can't see them. I'm like, what are you guys even talking about? Like, they're like literally pixel counting, like how many pixels this highlight is on this leaf that they had to zoom in 800 times to show you on the screen. And I'm like, honestly, in motion, while I'm mainly looking at the main character and the opponent that I'm fighting, I really just don't notice that it's 8 pixels on this version and 6 pixels on the other, on the highlight on the leaf way in the background. It's like the differences are so small that when stuff is in motion and I'm paying attention to the action, like I don't even notice the graphical differences. Now, what I will say is I can notice when the frame rate is drastically different, right? That can make a difference, and a PC can go a long way there. But that also depends on, you're going to have to upgrade your monitor in order to make that difference really noticeable. So
yeah, and I would ask, are you a competitive gamer or are you a recreational gamer, right? So I would say that for a recreational experience, you want that immersive, having fun, enjoying it, maybe watching it with friends or whatever. I would definitely be doing that in the theater. Whenever I play Xbox, which is rarely, I'm playing it on a 150-inch screen, not on a 32-inch monitor. So I think the theaters, I think that's one of the great things about theaters, that you can use them for TV and sports and movies and video games, etc.
And look, if it really comes down to it, if you find that one game where you're like, look, the PS5 version is just clearly visibly inferior to the way I can play it on my PC, you do have the option of lugging your PC into the home theater. It's like, it's not like it can't be done. So yeah, to me, I'm playing it in the theater for sure.
Just get a long ass HDMI cord. Come on.
Yeah, you got the Rui Pros, man. Those Rui Pros with the detachable ends, the fiber optic, they're not even crazy expensive. Yeah. All
right, so let's try and get to the 10th question then, and then I'll make my confessions. Okay, go ahead. I'll let you read it out.
Well, this is Rob X, not me, a different Rob. That's what Tom would always say. So Rob's Pre-Pro is an Anthem AVM 78K. Pretty darn nice unit. He's been running a 7.2.6 speaker configuration with Arundel 1528 flagship bookshelf 8 and center 8 speakers up front, but the Arundel 1723S THX series speakers everywhere else. Now he's looking to finally expand to the full 9.2.6 configuration that his Pre-Pro can handle by adding a pair of front wide speakers.
Yay, front wides!
Front wides! You've got 2 front wide fans here. It's like literally the only podcast with such a thing. But he can't quite bring himself to spend the amount for another pair of 1528 bookshelf 8 speakers as his front wides. He was thinking he'd get another pair of 1723 Monitor S speakers for front wide duty. But will that be a meaningful reduction in sound quality? Would the increased immersion make up for it? And will it actually be the case that his front left and right speakers will now be playing a little bit less sound than they have been up until now? Like, some of the sound that will now be played by his front wide speakers presumably used to come out of his front left and right speakers. Is that correct? So will he be sacrificing some amount of the best possible performance?
Yes. You cannot do this. Don't ever think about your front wides need to be the exact same as your front 3 speakers, or you can't watch it in a movie.
I mean, objectively speaking, he's not wrong. Some of the, particularly in upmixing situations, some of the sound that'll be played out of the front wides is going to have been drawn from the surround speaker and the front speaker with the front wide in between it. But yeah, that's mostly in upmixing situations. In the discrete sound situation, I guess that sound that's going through as an audio object to the front wide location, that sound doesn't disappear, so it's being played by something else. But it's often being played in combination between the front speaker and the surround speaker to give you that front wide positioning. Whereas now it'll be coming from the front wide speaker. So technically speaking, some of the sound is not being played by the front speaker anymore, but it was usually being played in combination with your surround speaker anyway. So whatever downgraded audio quality was happening between the, oh no, Arundel 1723 speakers, my goodness, how do you live with such a downgrade? Yeah, realistically speaking, I mean, you know the answer to this. I think this is tongue-in-cheek, because obviously front wide speakers are not playing anywhere near as frequently as your front left and right speakers, and this just is not going to be any sort of a sacrifice.
And so you're currently running a 7.2.6 system. I have a 926 in my theater right out here and really enjoy it. I was serious that my front left and right wides are the exact same speaker as my front 3. But my overhead's not, and I don't lose a lot when I go from, something in front of me to something just ahead of me. They're similar. They have very same, the Sonance speakers, the same tonal characteristics. I don't think you're going to be devastated by using a 1723 for your wides. I don't think it's a problem. But I do think the 1528 would sound better.
Joe, don't let Matt Pose hear you say that you're in agreement with me that you can actually have like physically different overhead speakers from your front speakers. It's just sacrilege.
Ideally, if every single speaker in your theater was the exact same speaker, and you had 32 positions all the way around you, and sure, it'd sound better. But we have to live in the real world at the same time.
I mean, look, I genuinely think you're going to be very okay with Arundel 1723 front wide speakers.
And I'm curious, Rob X, how wide is your room? And when you're placing those front wides, make sure that you are, if you look at the Cedia RP22, you're going to measure from that front left speaker to your surround left speaker and put it, probably right in the middle in between the two of those, because you really are trying to fill in the gap as sounds transition around you.
I still make the argument, though, that kind of regardless, I mean, they're with exception in my opinion, but kind of regardless, I'm starting at like the 60-degree azimuth. Like the 60-degree azimuth is
probably
pretty
where you're
optimal.
End up pretty close to that anyways.
If your other speakers are also optimally placed azimuth-wise, angle-wise, that's where they're going to end up anyway. And then, with exception, if your surround speakers are considerably farther back, then that front wide might nudge its way down the sidewall a little bit type of thing. But I start at that 60-degree azimuth.
And then in theory, from a height standpoint, if you draw a line between your front left tweeter and your side left tweeter, that on that line is how high you want to have the tweeter for the wide.
In theory, but
otherwise you can't watch movies.
Right, that's right. You're just not allowed. The police are going to come. There's more to Rob's question here. Rob X was about to buy some GIC Acoustics TriTraps with their range limiter flex range membrane on the fronts of those. But then he saw a video saying that putting triangular pieces of insulation into the corners of your room doesn't work particularly well, because even though the sound pressure level at bass frequencies might build up in room corners, air particle velocity actually goes down. And insulation-based panels require air movement in order to be effective. So it would be better to just straddle rectangular panels across the corners, or to stand any triangular panels away from the walls. Is that correct? Are GIC TriTraps not actually a good idea or a good purchase? If so, what should he get instead?
So you are correct from a motion flow standpoint that particle velocity does slow down as you reach a barrier, and particle density does increase. But
we have to be like with those specific words. That is correct, because we have to remember velocity is not the same thing as speed. Velocity includes a direction. So naturally, once you have sounds that are reflecting off of angled surfaces, 45-degree angled surfaces, if we're talking about a 90-degree corner, we're going to have the velocity slowing, because it is like, if we're tracking one particular air particle in its location in space, it's going to have waves that are both, going forward and back towards it, and then from the 45-degree angle from those reflections. So the velocity is going to slow, but it's not like the speed of sound slowed down. Speed is different from velocity. Velocity includes a vector.
We're talking about air molecules bumping into each other, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And those are that's still happening at the same frequency and the same speed. In fact, what it can be argued, there's with greater frequency, because we're also getting the reflected sounds that are coming back in, so the collisions are happening more frequently. But it's not like the temperature really rises, so that's kind of questionable there.
But I do think that the corner traps are a good way to go. Whether there is a piece of fiberglass that's straddling the corner with an air gap behind it, or whether it's, like a chunk trap where you just have nothing but thickness behind it of material, I think you can get similar results.
Yeah, I'm going to say that. So like we've been saying, the technical words that were said in that video are correct, but there was actually a piece missing. Which I don't know if that was intentional or if it was just forgotten about or whatever. He was trying to make a point and gain some clicks, whatever the motivation was. There was a piece missing to that, which is that predominantly what passive acoustic treatments, insulation-based treatments are doing is providing the opportunity for multiple changes of medium right? As we talked about before, when when waves of any sort are forced to transition to a different medium, it doesn't matter what that transition is. It doesn't matter if you're going from a denser medium to a less dense medium. Wherever the border is between those two different mediums, most of the wave is going to reflect back the way it came when it reaches that border. So like the perfect example of this is you make a sound or even an outright explosion underwater, and when that ripple of that wave reaches the surface of the water, you'd be like, nothing is stopping that wave from just coming out of the water and going right into the air, right? But that is a border between two, quite dissimilar mediums. Sound can travel through water, no problem. Sound can travel through air, no problem. But it reaches that border of the surface of the water where it meets the air, and most of the sound, including like an explosion, most of that wave reflects from the surface of the water where it meets the air and goes back down into the water. So what we're doing with a fibrous insulation material is giving lots of opportunity for the sound wave energy to have to transition between the air medium and the fiberglass medium or the rock wool medium or whatever it is. That means there's lots of reflections happening internally inside of the insulation, and that sound is getting all mixed up in whatever direction it's going. And every time it meets one of those boundaries between mediums, some of the energy is lost. Some of it dissipates into heat, some of it scatters, some of it transitions into the medium, but then has to transition again. So part of the notion of having an insulation panel with an air gap behind it is that, well, you're forcing another large medium transition, and then it reflects off the wall and it comes back through the air, but then it hits the insulation again, and it goes all through the insulation, and then it comes back out into the room on the other side, and you've lost a ton of energy by the time it's done that. So all of that is to say, yeah, the video did not say something technically wrong, but it also left out the medium transition part of things, which is predominantly how insulation-based material actually reduces the amount of energy in terms of like sound energy, kinetic energy, and transfers it into heat. So I disagree, honestly, on a practical term. I mean, look, you can measure it. We know corner bass traps, including super chunks, where you put the insulation all the way into the corner, like, we know it reduces reflected energy. That's not really up for debate. If you want to talk about the difference between air velocity versus pressure, like, okay, yeah, he was correct on that very technical level, but we know the sound energy gets reduced. So the other thing is, all of this is kind of moot with the GIC TriTraps because they aren't actually just solid insulation all the way through. They might have a triangular frame, but the insulation is basically a panel straddling the front portion of that, quite thick, thicker than you might expect, but then there is an air gap behind that. So even if you want to purely go with the argument that the video made, the TriTraps already address that and have the air gap built in.
Yeah, GIC knows what they're doing. I think you can trust their products.
They really do. Yeah. So feel free to go ahead and get those. Is this the last part of his question? It is. He's got an Xbox Series X in his setup, and he'd prefer to have all of the audio, including game chat, playing out of his full immersive audio setup. No headset or headphone audio for him while he's gaming. But he still wants to be able to use a microphone and chat with his teammates. Google Gemini came back with a suggestion for a generic throat microphone, or what appeared to be kind of an inexpensive cardioid mic that had a bunch of RGB lighting on it. Neither of those looked particularly impressive to him. So do we have any suggestions for a mic that will clearly pick up his voice, but be able to filter out all of the surround coming from his full immersive speaker system? Because any mics he's tried so far pick up at least a little bit of the sound from his speakers, and that can result in echoes or feedback in the game chat, and that's no good. So what can we suggest there?
Yeah, so it looks like you got 3 different links here to a couple of different choices, so I'm going to let you expand on this because this is not something I've done a lot with. I know whenever I'm using a mic to play video games, it's, a basic headset. So.
Right. So one of the issues here is that it's an Xbox Series X. And because of Microsoft's whole thing with the formats that they support on that console, unfortunately, you can't just take like any USB microphone and plug it into a USB port on the Xbox Series X and have it work. It just won't work. Their operating system won't allow it. So there is a suggestion, and actually, from the links that he sent, this is one of the ones that Google Gemini suggested to him. It doesn't look super impressive and it doesn't feel super impressive, but there's a brand called Tonor, Tonor. They have a microphone called the TCX3. It's a little bit strange. The RGB lighting is stupid and you should absolutely turn it off because that takes the battery life, and this thing does run off of batteries, from 2 hours with the lighting on to 30 hours with the lighting off. I really don't care about RGB lighting that much on my microphone to sacrifice 28 hours of battery life. The weird thing is you can't have it plugged into power while you're using it. It has to be on its battery while you're using it, which is strange. But with 30 hours, you should be fine. It is plastic. It feels kind of cheap. It is only about $50, so it is kind of cheap, but it's a microphone with a cardioid pattern, which means that it picks up the sound that's going straight into the microphone, but rejects most of the sound from around the rest of the microphone. The problem is, if you've got a full immersive audio system, you do have speakers behind you. The sound is coming from the same direction as the sound coming out of your mouth, and the mic is going to pick that up. It's not going to reject that noise. Also, I don't think the TCX3 is like fantastic audio quality, although given the state of chat microphones on most headsets, you're going to sound better than everybody else. So given that you can buy it on Amazon and return it very easily, I'd be willing to give it a try, because this is one of the few microphones that works this way, has like cardioid pattern rejecting noise from other than speaking directly into the mic, that you can plug right into your controller that you've got in your hand, like any other chat headset, and it just works with the Xbox. You don't have to do anything else to make it work. So it's worth a try, given how inexpensive it is. But my suggestion would be, if you're willing to spend a bit more, what you basically want is a shotgun microphone, right? You want the type of microphone that really rejects everything except what's going right into the barrel of the mic. And for you, like, we see shotgun microphones on movie stages all the time. That's what they're using to record the actors while they're acting. But you have the boom mic operator who's like carefully pointing their shotgun mic at the actors' mouths out of frame from where the camera is, and you're not going to be able to do that while you're gaming. So you'd probably have it pretty darn close to you. You'd have to turn the gain way down, because shotgun mics have very high gain on them. But Rode is like the brand if you want a shotgun mic, and they have a very convenient, small, not super expensive one called the Video Mic Go. They're on generation 2 now, so it's the Video Mic Go 2, and it's $99. And it has a 3.5 millimeter jack that can plug right into the Xbox controller, but it won't work out of the box. You need one more piece to go along with the Rode Video Mic Go 2 at $99. You need their $10 additional cable, the Rode CS7 cable, which changes it from a TRS 3.5 millimeter connection to the TRRS 3.5 millimeter connection that the Xbox controller needs in order to understand that you've plugged a microphone into it. So you're coming at $110 altogether for the Rode solution. It's going to sound better. It's going to reject more noise, but it costs double.
How are you going to point that Rode right at you? You're going to put it on a mic stand, or what's your
You got to
intent?
put it on a mic stand.
Yeah,
you got to put it on a mic stand. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. That's it. All right. So I'm going to say we do have some questions on the list, but that's because we haven't had a build up from missing an entire week. We've got Scott on the list with a whole bunch of updates from his brand new fancy looking office setup. We've got JR, and we've got Chris. I believe that's everything that came in, even all the way up to Monday, but we're not quite done yet, even though we're already over 2.5 hours, because we wanted to talk about something Joe wanted to talk about.
So, Rob, I have a confession.
Okay.
I really like widescreen screens. My first screen was a 16 by 9, 106-inch screen, previous house.
Yes.
I went from that to a 2.35, 120-inch diagonal screen, and it felt more cinematic, right?
Sure.
I when I go to the movie theaters and I watch in a commercial theater a wider screen, it feels more cinematic.
Okay.
But I think it's not the best solution for home theater anymore. Rob and I talked about this a little while back offline, but I'd recently gone to a new screen. So I replaced my Stewart Studio Tech 130, 120 inch wide, 130 inch diagonal screen with a Seymour Screen Excellence 150 inch 16 by 9 with vertical motorized top and bottom masking.
Okay.
So it's been a game changer. So I'm a product of the 1980s. A lot of my favorite movies, Ghostbusters, Predator, Aliens, were all 16 by 9 movies. When I was watching those...
Or 1.85 to 1
sure,
in many cases.
True.
Yeah.
But when I was watching those on a 235 screen, I had, feet of black bars on either side in a lot of
left
cases.
and right sides, yeah.
and now being able to watch those on a much huger screen is fantastic. Now, when I do go down to a 235 image, the masking fills in that space. So those black bars are entirely filled up. And my current widescreen image is wider than my previous one because this screen is 130 inches wide. The old one was 120 inches wide. So I still feel like walking into the room, it may feel less cinematic, but and that's just, it's my cross to bear apparently. But it's, so the other thing I haven't touched on yet was the both variable aspect ratio films. So if you're watching Maverick or Top Gun, whatever, that kind of stuff, I can just leave them all the way open and I can jump back and forth and I don't lose anything. I can get the full IMAX. It goes back down. I'm not missing out. As opposed to if I had watched that and blown out the edges, I would be shooting off the screen. So I had actually set a preset at one point where I would just black crop that stuff, which wasn't, I was missing out on some of the picture then.
Yeah,
so
you like when you're talking crop, you literally are having some of the image like not being shown to you.
Right. And I can also, when watching a lot of the streaming, so much of the stuff is 2.0 to 1. But with the vertical top and bottom masking, I've got a screen that'll fit that exactly, which the 235 or the 16:9 never did. Right. So there's just huge advantages to, and obviously it's not a cheap solution. This screen costs as much as a lot of other people might spend on other stuff, but the motorized masking has been a game changer for me personally on this. I still watch my Kaleidoscape menu in 235. And if I launch a 235 movie, I can then close the masking. Or if I launch a 16:9 movie, no problem. It's, all up there. I never have to worry about coming out of a 235 preset onto an Apple TV menu and having it off the screen, parts of it you couldn't see. And then also way less wear and tear and wait time on the projector, right? So that motorized lens memory, which never stayed 100% perfect. It drifted a little bit over time.
A tiny little bit of drift that happens.
Right. But also, that's a lot of wear and tear. You start shifting that thing back and forth 2 or 3 times, if you're watching different programming. I'm someone who likes to, jump around and watch different scenes from Kaleidoscape, for example. You were just waiting a long time for that to move back and forth. So no more of that. So there's just been a lot of big advantages, although I still like the way a 235 screen looks hanging on the wall. But, I'm in a room with 9-foot ceilings. I still have more space in the room because it's a 19-foot wide room. So there's a lot of room on either side of the screen still. But boy, that 150-inch screen with the top and bottom masking has been a big improvement. So it's just been something that, you're always learning, you're always changing, you're always evolving within this hobby.
Well, here's the thing. Like, not all of it is entirely up to your personal preference because... like, movie making has changed over the decades, and we can visibly see how much aspect ratio selection is varied more now in movies that I'm seeing from year to year than I think it has been in the past. Like we've had changes in aspect ratio, but it seemed like we sort of had eras, right? Like there was eras where almost everything was in the widest widescreen it could possibly be, and we had eras where almost everything was 1.85 to 1.
I mean, in the 1960s, they were going wider and wider and wider, right? If you go, Panavision, 2.8 to 1 and some of these crazy aspect ratios.
Cinerama.
Yeah.
But we had these sort of eras where there was like, most movies were kind of similar for a period of time. But today, like I didn't even mention it with Bugonia, but that one is in a 1.5 to 1. Aspect ratio. So on a 16:9 screen, there's thin black bars on the left and right. But I will say some of the establishing shots in the beginning, like you really did get that sense of, this is a taller screen, right? That like a taller image than normal because it's been pillar boxed on the left and right a little bit. It's kind of like showing a 1.43 to 1, but it's a little bit wider than a 1.43 to 1 IMAX, being shown on a 16:9 screen. So, but like I haven't seen 1.5 used very much at all in other things, but here it is in a 2025 movie, right? So, and yeah, like you say, lots of 2.0 to 1, but lots of varying. I mentioned long legs multiple times. I'm like, I think it's vital. I think it's vital to see that movie with the changing aspect ratios. It is part of the setup of the establishing
It's a storytelling tool.
It's part of the story. Yeah, I think it's vital to see it. So it's like if I were watching long legs on a 2.35 to 1 cinema scope screen and I had filled the width of the screen, like I am literally losing part of the storytelling by having part of that image, being cast above and below or having completely cropped off with that movie. So people have misunderstood me since the beginning of this podcast, and I ever talked about which aspect ratio screen to get for your projector, because ultimately I have said 16:9. That's my choice and that's my recommendation. But I've always said I want an enormous 16:9 screen for a projector, and then ideally either 4-way masking. Because look, when I get a 1.5:1, why shouldn't I be able to mask on the sides as well and not have the pillar box bars being visibly projected? So either 4-way masking or I don't even think that crazy solution of a massive 16:9 screen and then a smaller 16:9 screen. So a massive 16:9 with top and bottom masking only, and then a smaller 16:9 for when I want things that they shouldn't be that wide. they should be narrower. I can have a second 16:9 screen that comes down in front that's smaller than the other one. Tom has always thought I've been crazy with that, but when people have distilled down what I've said in the past of Rob thinks your projector should go on a 16:9 screen, I'm like, you left out the part where it's enormous. Mm-hmm. And then I have masking or a second smaller one that comes down in front of it.
Yeah, no, I'm sitting 10, 11 feet away from that 150-inch screen, so it's filling up all of my view when I'm sitting in front of it. So I love it. I agree. There are solutions out there, whether it's like Stewart's Director's Choice, which is a 4-way masking, or their Gemini screen, which can drop 2 different motorized screens.
Right. And Seymour has 4-way masking available as well.
Mm-hmm. Or I've seen people will do a fixed screen and then drop a bigger screen in front of it sometimes.
That's right.
There's ways to do that. And
of course, your smaller 16:9 screen could be mounted to the wall, and then the bigger one comes down in front of it.
Right.
But typically getting the roll down bigger screen and then also having top and bottom masking for that one, the price goes up versus having top and bottom masking on a wall-mounted gigantic screen and then having a roll down screen that's smaller that comes down in front of that. Just so purely price-wise, that's often the case. But yeah, don't leave out the part of my recommendation where that 16:9, that's the aspect ratio, but it's huge.
Mm-hmm. Love it. And then I also will throw out there that anybody interested in seeing more about my theater, I will be in the next week or two recording an episode of Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson. That we're going to do a tour of my theater. So I'm going to pre-record some video of it, and we're just going to kind of talk through everything done. So I'll send you guys a link when that does come out.
Sweet. And we might as well say it right now. How can folks get in touch with you, Joe, if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, so probably the best way is on AVS Forum. Again, I'm JSKMDWK if you guys want to shoot me a PM or something like that.
Right on. So with that, I'll thank our listeners of the week one more time. I don't know who donated to PayPal this week. Tom will remind us when he comes back next week. Patreon.com/AVRant Podcast is where you can go if you want to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 121 patrons over there, Rohan, Andy, and Nathan. Thank you for being 3 of them. And then thank you for the notes of gratitude and encouragement just for keeping this podcast going. We got Infinite Gary, Dazz, Christian, Ilango, Rohan, Andy, Karl, Nathan, Scott, JR, and Tim this week. Nice big list because we missed a bunch of emails, but it's nice to see all those messages rolling in. So huge thanks for everybody who did that. Huge thanks to Joe Klusnick. Thank you so much for being my co-host this week.
My pleasure. And anytime I can make it, happy to.
All right. So on behalf of Tom Andrew, you know what? Before I do that, let's say it one more time. How do you get in touch with us here? question@avrant.com. The emails are working again. We have evidence that plenty of emails came in. So question@avrant.com is the way to get in touch with us. So on behalf of Tom Andrew, this has been AVRant. My name is Rob H.
And I'm Joe Klusnick.
Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.